Chapter 1783. It was that night. Didn't Qianqian run out? Then, Fong Tongtong gave a vague explanation. Mom, don't be here. Mrs. Fong was enraged when she heard that. Yi Qianqian ran out. And then the two of you hooked up? Tell me. Mrs. Fong's voice wasn't soft, and Fong Tongtong was nervous when she heard it. She immediately hung up the phone and said, Mom, there's nothing like that. Don't overthink it. Nothing. Mrs. Fong stared at Fong Tongtong's phone. Why did you hang up the phone if
Chapter
you didn't?
1800.
You asked this
Lao
man
Zhou
to tell
didn't
me.
understand.
What's the meaning
When
of
he
this?
heard the busy
You're
tone on the
two-timing,
other end of
aren't
the
you?
phone.
No.
He felt that they
Fong
were a little
Tongtong was
baffled.
about to
Now
explain
that the
when
woman
her phone
had come
rang
knocking
again.
on his door,
When she saw old
wasn't
Shun's
it
name on the
obvious what
screen,
she was trying to
Fong
say?
Tongtong
She
covered her
wanted
phone
to get
and
back
said,
together.
Mom,
But now the
it's
man
none
was
of your
putting on
business.
airs.
Go back
After
to your
Shen
work.
Jilia hung up the phone.
No way.
He stopped
However,
eating and
Fong
stared at his
Tongtong
phone.
ran out with her
Yi
phone in her
Qianqian
hand.
actually
In
went
a
to the
few
hospital
moments,
to
she
look
was
for
out of
me.
sight.
Did she change
Mrs.
her
Fong
mind and
stomped
change
her
her
feet
mind
in anger.
But why didn't
Since
she
she
call
couldn't
me?
catch up to Yi
Why didn't she even
Qianqian,
send me a
she
text
turned
or a
around and
WeChat
picked up the
message?
landline to call Yi
Jilia found it a
Qianqian.
little strange.
After Fong
His thumb
Tongtong
stroked the
confirmed that
phone,
her mother hadn't
and his
caught up to
emotions
her,
were a little
she heaved a
complicated.
sigh of relief.
However, deep in
She
his
answered
heart,
the phone.
there was an
Hello.
obvious and
What did you
uncontrollable
mean by
joy
that?
boiling up.
It's about
An
that
indescribable
day.
joy
After Yi
quietly
Qianqian
ascending.
ran out.
But he
Didn't
was
you
also
go home
worried
to
that his
bandage up your
thoughts were
wound?
just wishful
I
thinking.
went back to Yi
If he
Qianqian's
suddenly
house.
called her,
You
would he be
didn't come
rejected
back,
again?
and neither did
Jilia
Qianqian.
was a little nervous.
That night,
Before
I
he
called
could
someone
take
and
action,
accidentally
someone
let it
called
slip.
out from outside.
I said that the two of
Dr.
you might
Shun.
break up.
Yes,
If you didn't say it
Jilia
first,
looked up and
then
looked
Yi
outside.
Qianqian would.
A petite
After
young
all,
lady in
you're
her
a
early
man,
20s walked
and you've
in
been
with a
slapped in
lunchbox in
public.
her hand.
No one can
She
stand
had a
it,
big
right?
smile on her
Fong
face as she
Tongtong.
said,
You're
Dr.
the most
Shun,
disgusting and
thank you for
troublesome
what you did
person
just
I've ever
now.
met.
If it weren't for
Jilia
you,
was so
I
angry
really wouldn't
that he
know what
didn't
to
bother
do.
to hide his
Women
anger.
like that are the most
What happens
troublesome.
between me and Yi
Next
Qianqian
time,
has nothing
you
to
have
do
to
with
solve
you.
this kind of problem
Today,
on your own.
I'll make things
I
clear
can help
with
you once,
regardless
but I
of
can't
whether
help
or
you a
not Yi
second time,
Qianqian
and I
I've
end up
seen
together.
many women like that.
Right now,
The
at
key
this
is
very
that a young
moment,
lady
I
like
really,
you
really
shouldn't
love
speak
Yi
carelessly
Qianqian.
if you don't
Even
know
if
what to
Yi
say.
Qianqian wanted my
The
life
young
right
lady
now,
stuck out her
I
tongue
wouldn't
and
have
said,
anything to say.
I was wrong.
As for
But
you,
you're
before
really
this
amazing.
incident,
You
I
made that
treated
woman
you as
shut
Yi
up with
Qianqian's
just a
best
few
friend.
words.
Now,
I admire you
I
so
only
much.
treat you as a
When
wishful
Shen Jilia
thinking
heard
mistress.
that,
He
who only
harumphed and
knows how
turned
to
his head
use
away.
underhanded
He
means
said,
to destroy
save the
other
flattery.
people's relationships.
Finish your meal and get to work.
Every word was enunciated
serious.
clearly.
I
Shen
really
Jilia's
admire
tone
you.
was harsh.
Look at how
but
capable
every word
you
was
are.
deadly.
You're so
Fong
handsome.
Tongtong gripped
And
her
yet you
phone
don't
tighter
allow
and
people to
tighter as
speak
she
the
gritted
truth.
her teeth.
The more the young
However,
lady
his
spoke,
eyes had
the
already
redder her
turned
face
red.
became.
She stared
Shen
at the
Jilia
course
had a
wall in
look of
front of
disdain
her
on his
and
face.
took a deep breath.
He lowered his head
She
and
opened
ate.
her mouth to
As he
speak,
spoke, he
but
said,
tears were
"Just
already
keep the
flowing
truth
from
to
her
yourself.
eyes.
I'll
Shen
be proud
Jilia,
if you say it out loud.
You'll regret this."
The young lady burst
Fong
out laughing.
Tongtong was on the
She
verge
looked
of
up at
crying
Shen
out loud.
Jilia and asked,
However, Dr.
She
Shun,
managed to
I
suppress
heard
the
that you've
urge with
broken
her
up with your
rationality.
girlfriend?
Shen
When
Jilia
Shen
naturally
Jilia
knew
heard
how
that,
much
he
damage
rolled
his
his
words
eyes
had
at her
caused
and
to a
much
girl.
thinner
than last time.
The guilt in
Those
his
little
heart
she
grew.
doesn't look
Gossiping
very well.
behind the
However,
scenes again.
Elder Zhou
If he
scratched
didn't
his
say
head
those
and
words
said,
now,
definitely
I say
cause
Brother
trouble
Shun
and
wouldn't
spout
be the
nonsense.
only
Both of
one
you
who
aren't
would be
happy
when the
about
young
breaking
lady
up.
heard this.
There
Why
would
did
be
the
smile
smile
on
on
her
her
face
face
faded
faded
a
as
little.
well?
Isn't it a bad
She
thing
said
to
no.
make everyone
Everyone's
sad?
deepened
Shen
as he
Jilia
pulled
looked
up
up and
and
said with a half
"That's
smile.
not up to you to decide.
What else?
Are
Yi
you still
Qianqian
hoping that
is
I'll
really
split it?
unlucky to have a
How
best
can that
friend
be?
like
I'm
you.
busy.
You have to
Don't
be
still
happy
have a
yourself.
bunch of things to do
But
after
since you guys
dinner.
are
I won't
fine,
send you an
why did you
invitation
change
when
your
we
phone
get married.
contact?
Don't
You're
you
on your
think
own
you're
now.
being too heartless?
When he heard this,
Chapter
Shen Jilia paused in the
1784.
middle of eating
When she heard
and
the
looked
busy
up at her
tone
with
from
a
the
sharp
other
look
end
in
of the
his eyes.
eyes.
How
Fong
did you know?
Tongtong suddenly
Hearing
felt
this,
as though
the
all the
girl looked
energy
a
in
little
her body
guilty
had
and
been
immediately
sucked out.
said,
His grip
I
loosened,
accidentally saw it
and the
once.
phone fell to the ground.
How did you see it?
The ground was
Shen
made of
Jilia
hard
put
cement.
down his chopsticks
Just by
and
listening
wiped
to
his
the
mouth
sound,
with a piece of tissue.
one could tell that it was
Aye.
a tragic end.
You went through my
Fong
phone?
Tongtong
No, your
stared at
phone
the
has a
ground.
password.
She squatted
How could I
down
find
and
it?
picked up her phone. She blinked her eyes hard, and tears immediately formed
Chapter
in her already dry
1801.
eyes.
He couldn't
With
stop
reddened
asking
eyes,
questions.
She slowly
A trace
lowered
of
her head and
embarrassment
walked in.
flashed across
Mrs.
the girl's
Fong
face.
was on the phone. phone,
she said,
and it
I was
sounded like
just
she was
guessing.
quarreling.
How can an
What do you
ordinary
mean?
person's phone
Isn't
not have a
Tong Tong good to
password?
you?
Now
Is
that
that
something
so?
like this happened between your
Julia's voice
voice was
was
full
full
of
of
suspicion.
If it weren't for
Do you
you,
think I'll believe
would my
you?
daughter have lost her innocence?
CK. What
Now
I said
you're
is
trying
true.
to shirk
It's up to
responsibility
you whether you
by
believe
saying
me
that
or
you don't
not.
know.
I'm
The
telling
little girl
you,
stood
it's
up
impossible.
and wanted to leave
Fong
with the
Tong
lunchbox.
Tong was in a daze when she
Julia
heard
narrowed
her mother's
his
eyes
eyes
and said,
This
Did she misunderstand something?
The little
What
girl's
innocence?
movements paused.
What did she mean by
She
that?
turned her head and
Why
said
did it
somewhat
sound like
angrily,
Julia
Why
had
are you
done
so
something
annoying?
indescribable with
Didn't
her?
you like me just
When
now?
Mrs. Fong
Didn't
heard
you
the
say that
voice
you
coming
admired
from
me?
behind her,
Why have you
she
changed so
immediately
quickly?
turned around
and
and
looked
looked
at
at
her
her
daughter.
phone.
She
Lin
waved
Miao
at
Miao,
her and
tell
said,
me the truth.
To think that you
Lin
treated
Miao
her
Miao
as a good
stomped her
friend.
foot and replied,
What does Yi Qianqian
"Oh no, I
mean by
didn't.
this?
It's just
Come
that
here."
the last time we were
As
working
Mrs. Fong
overtime
spoke,
together,
she had
weren't
already
you in
turned
the
on the
hospital?
speaker.
I went
Fong
back to
Tong
the
Tong
office
was silent
first
for a moment
and saw
before
that
she
your
called
cell phone
out,
was ringing.
Qianqian.
I took a look
Fong
at it
Tong Tong,
and saw that the
Yi
name on it was
Qianqian
Yi
sounded a little
Qianqian who
tired.
dumped me.
Can't you
That's
be
how
more
I knew.
shameless?
You
Shen
weren't
Julia
like this in
frowned
the
when he
past.
heard that.
Yi
Shen Julia's
Qianqian's
tone
unlocked
wasn't
his phone
harsh,
and
but the
opened his
contempt in
contact
it was
list.
unbearable.
While he was
Fong
looking at the
Tong Tong
record,
was about to
he
say
also saw
something,
other notes
but
in
Yi
it.
Qianqian
There were
had
no
already hung
changes,
up.
but
Mrs.
there was
Fong
no
was
record of Yi
furious when she
Qianqian
heard
calling.
that and roared.
He placed the
What's
phone
the
on the
meaning
table.
of this?
Didn't
Tong
you say
Tong,
that you had
what
a
does
call?
this woman mean?
What about now? It
Seeing
wasn't just
this,
Mrs.
Lin
Fong.
Miao Miao lowered
Fong
her head and
Tong
said
was also
meekly,
fuming with
I
rage.
deleted it.
The faint
How
sense
did you
of guilt
delete
in
it?
his heart had completely
I'll
vanished.
use an AI robot.
If you are heartless,
An
I will
AI
be
robot can
unjust.
delete it?
Since you
Yes,
guys are
AI
going to break
robots
up,
are very powerful.
why don't you break up completely?
All right, I'll give it a try.
Yi Qianqian
As Shen
felt that the
Julia
events
spoke,
of the past
he picked
few
up his
days
phone
had
and pressed
tormented
the
her
middle button
unbearably.
for a few
The
seconds
most
before
disgusting
saying,
thing was that
Siri,
she even felt
help me
disgusted
delete
by
Lin
her
Miao
own
Miao's
home.
contact
That
number.
night,
When Lin Miao
if
Miao
the two
heard
of them
this,
really
her
had
heart
that
raced
night,
like thunder.
it must have been
The
in her
phone
little
quickly
nest.
replied,
However,
Sorry,
he didn't know which bed it
any
was.
contact
How
information.
disgusting. Hearing
Yi
this,
Qianqian
Lin Miao
muttered
Miao's
and closed
face
her
turned
eyes
even
tightly.
redder. Just
She
then
was
his
so
phone
embarrassed
rang.
that she could
It
die.
was Shen Julia.
But in the end,
Yi
she
Qianqian
still
only
stomped
glanced
her
at it
foot
before turning
and
the
turned
phone
to
to
look at
silent
Shen
mode
Julia.
and putting it
I
aside.
can't take it anymore.
Yi had just
I'll
come
tell you the
downstairs
truth.
when she saw
Shen
Yi
Julia leaned
Qianqian's
back in his
extremely
chair
troubled
and
expression.
looked at Lin Miao Miao
She sat
calmly.
down beside her.
He was all ears.
Yi Qianqian glanced
Actually,
at Yi
I've
before
been
her
paying
eyes
attention
landed
to
on
you
her
ever
stomach.
since you came.
Time really
Although
flies.
I've only known you
Did
for
you
a
blow
few
air
days.
into your stomach?
I've heard a lot
How
of
did it get
legends
bigger
about
so
you before
quickly?
this.
I
It's a
really
real
admire
baby
you,
inside,
so I like to
Feel
follow
it.
you around. Once
Yi
I saw your
grabbed her
password,
hand,
and
0126,
gently stroked her
so
belly. The
You
child
answered her
isn't big
call?
now.
Yes.
In a little more
Lin
than a
Miao
month,
Miao's head
it
was
should
almost
start
buried
moving.
in her neck.
So
Shen
fast.
Julia's face
Yes,
was a little dark.
The child can be
and he
born
didn't look
after
too
more
good.
than 9 months
Lin
of
Miao Miao
pregnancy.
felt even more
At that
embarrassed.
time, don't
She
let
said
her
shyly,
silence sad face.
I heard that you were dumped
When she
and
heard
looked very
that,
sad.
the corners
You're
of her
more
mouth
emotional
twitched
than
and she
before.
replied, and your mood and
I've just fallen
personality
out
are
of love.
different. Can't
So
you
I
forgive
think it
me a
must be
little?
this woman's fault.
So I wanted to stand up for you.
Chapter 1785.
Why are you so nosy? As far as he could
Shen
remember,
Julia gritted his
Yi
teeth.
Qianqian was always noisy and cheerful.
You're the one
She
who's
had always
going to
been
get me into
optimistic.
trouble.
Do you know
that?
rarely saw Yi Qianqian so troubled. Yi Qianqian shook her head without hesitation.
Chapter 1802.
I don't want
What
to
right
see
do you
him.
have to do this?
Why?
Shen
If there's
Julia
something,
stood up.
it's better to
His
talk
face
it out.
darkened.
The most
Do you know
important
how much
thing
trouble
for a
you're
husband
causing
and
me by
wife
doing
is to
this?
be honest. Lin Miao
No
Miao
matter what
shrank
kind
back
of
a little
misunderstanding
nervously
you
and said,
have.
It'll be fine as
I'll
long
apply
as you
to
talk
have
it
you
out.
transferred out of my
Yi
office.
said softly
I'll
as
find
she
another
caressed her
assistant.
stomach. Yi
Shen Julia
Qianqian
stood
looked
up
up
and
and
picked
picked
up
up
his
his
phone.
phone and felt a little
Get out.
envious. Dr.
Yi
Shen
was a woman
I'm doing
who was
this
as
for your
gentle
own
as
good.
water.
She
Get
spoke
out.
softly.
Shen
was
Julia's
meticulous,
face was
stern.
understanding and
There was no
patient.
mercy on his
Any
face.
man would like a woman
Lin
like
Miao
Yi,
Miao had
right?
heard rumors
As
about
for
Shen
his
Julia.
temper,
It was really
said
terrible.
that this man appeared to
Thinking
be
of
sloppy
that,
and rarely
Yi
got
Qianqian
angry.
felt even worse.
But when he did,
she said,
few people
Yi,
could
we're not
withstand
married.
it.
We're not
Moreover,
husband and wife.
Shen Julia looked
We
like
just
he was
broke up.
serious.
You like
Lin
him
Miao
very
Miao
much.
didn't dare to say
You can lie
anything
to me
more.
about that.
She hugged
But
her
you can't lie
lunchbox
to
and
yourself.
walked out dejectedly.
Yi held her hand.
Shen Julia called
I always
Yi
thought that
Qianqian.
it was only a
She
matter
seemed
of
to be
time
busy
before
with
the
something.
two of you got married.
No one picked up the
No,
phone for a
you.
long time.
You don't know him at all.
At that moment,
Do you
Shen
know
Julia
Fong
was
Tong Tong?
actually glad that
Of
Yi
course I know
Qianqian
her.
hadn't blacklisted
She was my
him.
bridesmaid
But
at
why
my
didn't
wedding.
she pick up the
What
phone?
about it?
When
Yi
Yi
looked
Qianqian
at
walked out of the
Qianqian.
hospital,
She's been
she
staying
found
at
a
your
random
place for the
fast
past
food
few
restaurant
days,
nearby.
right?
And
Does
bought
this matter
something
have
to eat.
anything to do with
After
her?
eating,
Do you
he
think I
rushed to
really
the
like
company in a
Shen Julia,
hurry.
you?
After about
Yi
10
didn't
minutes,
know why Yi
she arrived
Qianqian
at the
suddenly
office.
changed the topic.
There were many people
After
on the
thinking
subway.
about it, she
there
said,
were no seats.
Well,
and
perhaps
the train
it's
was
already
swaying.
beyond liking.
Yi Qianqian
You love
didn't
him
look
very
at her
much,
phone.
sister. When she arrived
that
at the
so?
office,
I thought
She
so a
picked up
few
her
days
phone,
ago, and
but
saw
I don't
that there
think
were
so
2 missed
anymore.
calls.
It was,
If you love
someone,
someone, shouldn't you
when she saw
tolerate
the
everything
name,
about
Yi
them?
Qianqian's
In the
heart
past,
skipped a beat.
I thought I loved
It hadn't
Fang
been
Tong
long.
Tong.
Later,
But Yi
I
Qianqian's
thought I
palms
loved
were already
Shinjulia.
sweaty. But
She
when I
hesitated
found out
to
that
call
the two
back,
of them had sex,
but just as she
I
was
didn't
about
love
to make the
anyone
call,
anymore.
Yi
Yi
Qianqian cut
didn't
off the
expect
call.
to hear that.
Shinjulia
She
didn't
couldn't
help
help me
but
at
widen
this
her
time,
eyes and gasp.
because his colleague at
No way,
Kingstown
the two of them
Hospital
had
told
sex?
him that
Yi
I went to look
Qianqian
for
had
him.
expected
Did
such a
he?
reaction
If
from
I call
Yu.
back, what
She
should I
laughed
say?
bitterly and said,
Going to the hospital
"It's
to look for
unbelievable,
him
isn't
was
it?
just an impulse."
I think so too.
Now that she had
That's
calmed
impossible.
down, Yi
If
Qianqian began
Shinjulia
to
really
regret
got
it.
together with
The
Fang
overwhelming
Tong,
regret hit her.
based on my
She
understanding
looked at the
of him,
phone and
he would
hesitated for a
definitely
moment.
break up with you.
In the end,
It's
she didn't call
impossible
back.
for him to keep
Just
calling
as Yi
you
Qianqian
and
was
begging
about
you
to
to
put her
change
phone
your
away,
mind like he is
it
doing
suddenly
now.
vibrated.
Fang
A
Tong
melodious
said it was an
ringtone
accident.
followed.
It was
Yi was
Shinjulia.
speechless.
When Yi
Indeed,
Qianqian saw those
if
3 words,
Shinjulia had
her
fallen
limbs
in love
began
with
to
someone
stiffen.
else, What should I have broken up with Yi
after holding the phone for a while?
However,
if it was just an
finally
accident,
answered the call,
and the person Shenjilia liked
it was
and
a
loved
familiar
was still
voice.
Yi Qianqian.
Although the tone of her
Then it was
voice had changed
understandable that
slightly
things
over
would
the
turn
phone.
out like this.
In Shenjilia's
This
ears,
is outrageous.
it was as melodious
Yi
as
was
a melody.
infuriated.
Yeah,
to think
I
that
heard that you went
them
to our
so
hospital
well.
today.
Is this how they repay you?
Shenjulia's tone was calm.
Yi Qianqian
and
was
he
already in a
pretended that
terrible
nothing had
mood.
happened.
When she heard that, she
Qianqian
felt
felt
the
a little
urge to
awkward.
cry. She felt
I'll
extremely
call him and
embarrassed
ask.
at that moment.
She picked up the
But
phone
he still
and dialed
pretended to be
Shenjulia's
calm
number.
and said,
Yi Qianqian
"Yes,
laughed bitterly.
I've been feeling a
Do
little
you think it's
uncomfortable
possible for him
recently,
to admit it?
so I went to the
Yes,
hospital
it's
to have a
impossible.
checkup." Yi frowned and said,
Perhaps
"I happened
it's a
to pass by the
misunderstanding.
psychology department and thought that I haven't
Chapter
seen you for a long
1786.
time. So
You
I
believe
wanted
what
to say
Fong
hello."
Tong says?
I see.
Yi was
Shenjulia was a little
exasperated.
disappointed.
What if she just
Yi
wants you to
Qianqian's
break
heart
up?
raced as she
What
replied,
if she's up to no good?
Yeah.
What if
Why
she's
did you
already
suddenly go
taken a
back
liking
to
to
Shenjulia?
It was
and wants to
transferred
poach
by the
you
hospital
and become your mistress?
recently.
Something
wasn't
happened
that
in
Yi
the capital,
Qianqian hadn't
and we are
considered
short
these
of manpower
questions before.
So the
Meeting
hospital
Yi's
specially
gaze,
arranged a
Yi
small
Qianqian
assistant
said,
for me.
Fong Tong
So
has
busy.
never had a
Yi
boyfriend.
Qianqian's heart
How
skipped
could
a
she
beat.
blabber about something
Your
like
assistant
that?
is also a doctor,
Shenjulia
right?
is my boyfriend.
Yes, she was an
Everyone
intern,
knows
but
that.
she's gone now. If she's really trying to ruin our relationship, how bad would her reputation be if word got out?
Chapter 1803.
But I don't think it's possible.
I see.
Shenjulia
It
isn't
seems like
stupid.
you're quite lucky
Since
with
he
women.
loves you,
He
Yi
wouldn't be
Qianqian held
entangled
the phone
with
in her
another
hand
woman
and sat in her
Yi
seat.
defended Shenjulia.
Her tone was a little
I've known
ambiguous.
Shenjulia for almost
Hearing her
20
half-joking
years.
tone,
I think I have some
Shenjulia's
understanding of
previously
him.
depressed mood
But he
suddenly
lied to me.
relaxed. Yi
He chuckled
Qianqian's
and
eyes
asked,
reddened as
"What's
she
wrong?
revealed the truth.
Are you jealous?"
From the time
Of
Shenjulia
course.
hid his injury
If I had
from
a
her
beautiful
to the time
woman
she
by my
exposed
side
his
like
lie,
you,
my
to the
mood
time
at work
Fong
would be
Tong
different.
let slip.
That's true.
Yi explained
You're so
everything
happy
clearly.
No matter how
something
big or
happened
small
in
it
my
was,
family
the
recently.
details were
Do you
very
know about
detailed.
it?
What
Yi
happened?
was so
My
stunned by what
grandfather
she
passed
heard that
away.
she had nothing to
Some
say.
time ago,
There were suspicious
Shenjulia
points
had brought a
everywhere.
lot of
There were
Alzheimer's
loopholes
medicine for his
everywhere.
grandfather.
With so many
Now
things
those things had
Shenjulia
been
had
thrown
done,
away by Yi Jianhua.
it was difficult to convince
Shenjulia was
others
silent
that he
for a
was
moment
innocent.
before he said,
Yi remained
"Yeah, I heard
silent.
about it." When she saw Yi Qianqian would be the
reddened
first
eyes,
to
she
suspect
said,
Yi Qianqian.
"I think we should give
In
him
other
a
words,
chance to explain himself."
Shenjulia might have known about
There's
it
no
a long
need.
time ago.
Yi Qianqian
But he was
interrupted
stingy
her.
with his condolences.
Fortunately,
We're
Yi
not married
Qianqian
yet.
felt uncomfortable
If we break up
when she
now,
thought
we
about
might
it.
as well.
Who
Shenjulia
knows, this
quickly
might be a
said,
good start.
"Your sister said
Yi
you were
was
very
indignant.
sad, but
You're
I was
just going to
afraid
let
that
it
you
go
would
like
be even
that.
sadder if you
What
heard
else
her
can I
voice."
do?
So
Of course not.
That's my
Which
sister.
man doesn't have a few
Yi
ex-girlfriends
Qianqian found it a
outside?
little funny.
Can't you just
Her
treat
lips
it
curled up as if he's had an
But I didn't
ex-girlfriend
expect you to
before.
be so self-aware.
But Fong Tong
You're right.
is my best friend
If I heard
since
your
I was
voice
young.
at that time,
She's a good
I
friend
would
of
indeed
mine.
be very sad.
Even a rabbit doesn't eat the
Shenjulia had
grass near its
expected it.
nest. But he
What does
still
this
smiled
mean?
bitterly when
Furthermore,
he heard that. Fong Tong's mother called me just
Qianqian's
now.
voice came through
She
again.
scolded me for ruining her
Shenjulia held
daughter
the phone in his
and
hand
bringing her to the
and
front
remained
of a
silent.
beast. I'm quite happy
Yi
to hear your
Qianqian
voice
almost
now.
burst into tears.
Shenjulia's
She almost
heart
couldn't
beat
hold it
faster.
in.
But he still
Yi
pretended
panicked
to be
and
calm
quickly
and
pulled
asked
her into
after
her
a long
arms.
pause. Don't cry.
Did you know that something
cry.
happened to Fong Tong
Yi Qianqian
recently?
wasn't the kind of person
Shenjulia
who
really
would cry
didn't
at the
know.
drop of a hat.
When he heard Yi
She
Qianqian's
wiped her
question,
eyes and
he
sniffled
became
before
curious
saying,
and asked,
"If Fong
"What happened?"
Tong's mother finds
This
out
was
about
almost
this,
an instinctive
it's
reaction
equivalent to the entire
but after
town knowing
Shenjulia
about
asked
it.
You know
He
how the
felt that
mouths of
something
women
was
in
wrong.
small towns
If
can
he
be.
asked that question,
Dad is an electrician.
would it mean that he
Everyone
felt
in the
something
town
different
knows
about
him.
Fong Tong?
Plus,
When
the
he
news of your
realized
grand
this,
marriage has probably
Shenjulia
spread all
immediately
over the
changed
world.
his tone and
Now
said,
that something like
"It's
this
fine
has
if
happened,
you don't want to tell me.
I'm really afraid
I don't really
that if
want
I
to
go
know.
back to the town,
Yi Qianqian
I'll be
replied,
criticized by the
she
people
was
in the
raped by a
town.
man who was older
Aya,
than her father.
you hit her.
When
You're
Shenjulia
the
heard
mistress.
this, his eyes widened
You're
in
the victim.
disbelief.
Why are you
No
acting
way.
as though you
When
owe
I
them
heard
something?
about it, I was shocked
Don't let
too.
me down.
I found it hard
what
to
will I
believe.
do in the future?
Later, when I went to the hospital, she was
Chapter
crying so hard that she
1787.
fainted.
There will be
During the
retribution.
surgery, her
Those
mother
words
was
kept
crying so
echoing
hard
in Yi
too.
Qianqian's
Yi
mind.
Qianqian's
After
voice
dinner,
became softer.
Yi Qianqian slept at
Shenjulia
Yi's
could imagine
side.
the expression on Yi
Qianqian was
Qianqian's
Yi's
face right now.
biological sister.
After a moment
So
of
she
silence,
didn't shy
he
away
asked,
and stayed
"Why
in the
did this
guest room?"
happen? Although
This
Li
was
Jinan
probably
was busy with
retribution.
work, he often
Yi
went
Qianqian
home.
believed in
When
that.
he saw Yi Qianqian,
The elders in her
he
family
would say
would
a
always
few
tell words to her from a distance. Shouldn't do bad things. However, he was
Otherwise,
her sister's
bad
husband.
luck would befall
When
them
Yi
one day.
Qianqian thought of
In the
Feng
past,
Tongtong,
he had always
she
felt
didn't dare
that
to get
pitiful
close
people
to
were
Li Jin
hateful.
Man. Days like that passed for 3 days
However,
in a row.
after
For the
what
past
happened
few
to
days,
Feng Tongtong,
Yi Qianqian went to the office
couldn't
at
bring
7 in
herself
the
to
morning
like that woman
and
at
got
all.
off work
If
at 9 in the
Feng Tongtong
evening.
hadn't gone to
She
her house
specially
that day,
instructed the
would such a
receptionist
thing
to
have
tell
happened?
Shinjilia that she had applied for leave or resigned if he came looking for her.
Chapter 1804.
The chief editor was very
Ever
pleased,
since Fong Tongtong was hospitalized,
Yi Qianqian
Yi
during the
Qianqian
meeting
had only
she
seen
was
her
given the
twice.
title of best
She was
employee
unwilling to meet
and
Fong
wasn't
Tongtong.
deducted from the full
She didn't even
attendance
offer her
award.
condolences.
In just a few days,
After learning that
everyone
Fong
knew that
Tongtong
Yi
was
Qianqian
fine,
had fallen
Yi
out of love.
Qianqian immediately
The
returned to
originally lazy
Kingstown.
performance queen
Sometimes
suddenly became
Yi
a
Qianqian
hard-working
felt that
person
her heart was
who went
cold
out
and
early
hard.
and came back
Otherwise,
late.
why
It was
didn't she offer
precisely
any
because of
condolences
this
to
that
Fong
Yi Qianqian's
Tongtong
performance
after
had
what happened
achieved
to her
results
after being
that
a
amazed
friend for
everyone
so many years?
in just a few days
However,
at the end of
she
the
couldn't
month.
bear to part
3
with
days was
Shinjilia,
neither a long nor
a man
short
whom
time.
she had known for
Yi
less than a
Qianqian
year
didn't dare to
and
stop.
had been together
She
for
was
less
busy
than
every
3
day,
months.
afraid
Every
that if
time
she
she
stopped,
thought about how
she
she
would
had
think of
lost this
Shinjilia
man because of
Fong
a few
Tongtong
slanderous words
and their affair.
Yi Qianqian
As for
felt
herself,
as if her heart
she
was
could
being
only
sliced
stay at
into
her
pieces.
sister's house and
At
seek
that moment,
comfort.
when she heard
However,
Shinjilia's
she
question,
didn't expect that
Yi
even though
Qianqian
Yi
replied,
Qianqian avoided
"This is
Shinjilia
fate."
so much,
Shinjilia
she
was
would still be
speechless.
stopped at the
After a
entrance of
long
the office.
silence, he said,
It was already
"What a
10
pity."
o'clock when she got off
Shinjilia
work.
really felt that
Yi
it was a pity,
carried her bag
but other than
and
pity,
walked downstairs.
he didn't have any other thoughts.
She was about to hail a
"I'm
cab
sorry,"
when she suddenly
Yi
felt a
Qianqian
grip
said
on her
softly.
arm.
Shinjilia was
Qianqian
silent
jumped in
as he
fright.
waited for her
She
to
screamed
continue.
and jumped back.
"Let's meet up.
It's me,"
Yi Qianqian said.
Shinjilia's voice rang
Shinjilia's
out,
heart suddenly
and Yi
relaxed.
Qianqian calmed down.
In an instant,
However,
he felt as
her
if he
heart
had
felt
grasped
as if it was
something.
being pricked
Yeah.
by needles.
When?
They hadn't seen
Shinjilia
each other for a
pretended to
few
be
days,
calm and asked,
but Shinjilia
"This weekend,
looked very
okay?
tired.
I've been
There
on
were
leave
dark
for too long
circles under his
recently.
eyes.
There are a
And
lot
his
of things
cheeks
to
were
do.
a little thin.
I'll go to the
Yi
capital to
Qianqian
look for
glanced
you
at
on
her
the weekend."
hand that was being
"There's
held
no
and
need,"
frowned in resistance.
Shinjilia said softly.
She twisted it and
Yi
said in
Qianqian's
disgust,
heart tightened when
"What do
she
you
heard
want?"
that.
I
She
just
said
want to tell you
nervously,
that I'm moving
"It's okay.
away.
I
I'll
won't
go to
bother you
Kingstown."
anymore."
Shinjilia's voice
loosened
was
his
gentle
grip.
and cautious.
"I've finished moving
Your time in the
everything.
capital is
I've
too
also
tight.
added a fish
You're
tank.
so busy with
Haven't
work.
you always wanted
It's
a
too
fish
tiring
tank?
to travel
I've
back and
reared your
forth in
favorite
only 2
tropical
days.
fish in it.
Yeah,
You can go back
Is food and
and stay there
accommodation
for the rest
included?
of the day.
Yes.
Yi
Yi
Qianqian
Qianqian
felt
answered
as
with
if
a
her
red
chest
face.
had been
Her
hammered by a
colleagues
hammer.
looked over.
Yi
When they
Qianqian
saw
felt
Yi
a little
Qianqian's
suffocated.
blushing face,
"That's your
they
house.
smiled suggestively.
It's your home. Yi
I'm just
Qianqian
lodging
saw the
here.
gazes around
Don't
her.
mess up your
And her
priorities."
expression became even
Shinjilia
more
smiled.
forlorn.
In the
Fortunately,
future,
take
they
good
were
care
still
of yourself.
some distance away from her.
Yi
At
Qianqian
least they
pursed
couldn't
her
hear
lips
her when she
tightly,
spoke,
and her eyes
she
suddenly
whispered into the
became
phone.
hot. She
I
lowered her
recently
head,
learned how to cook
not
curry
daring
rice.
to look at him.
I'll cook it for
But
you when you
Qianqian,
come.
I've never
The
done
corners of
anything to let you
Shinjilia's
down.
lips curled up.
I've done it before.
And he replied
I'm
in a
doing
soft
it now,
and affectionate voice.
and I'll be doing it in the
Yeah.
future.
I'm going to
Shinjilia
work.
gazed deeply
I'm hanging
into her
up.
eyes.
Yes.
I'll wait for
Yi
you to come
Qianqian
back.
hung up the phone
Yi
reluctantly.
Qianqian gripped the strap
She
of
looked
her
at the
bag
string
tighter
of
and
numbers on
tighter.
the screen.
That was what
and
she
decided
wanted,
to add a
wasn't
note
it?
to his name.
But why did she
The
feel so
broken
sad when
relationship
Shinjilia
ex-boyfriend
said those words?
Yep.
Hadn't
was
she
my
been hiding
ex-boyfriend
and
for the
running away
time
for
being.
so long?
If one
Because
day
she was afraid that he would
Shinjilia
pester
agreed to
her.
reconcile with
Now
her,
that he had
and
decided
they
to
could
let
move away,
bygones be bygones,
she felt empty in
she
her
would
heart.
change her mind. The discomfort that had accumulated
Chapter
for so many
1788
days seemed to have
It had
been
only been a
released,
few days
and
since he
even
last
the work
saw her.
became more
But
energetic.
Shinjilia could clearly
Sissy's name
feel
was
that
famous
she had
in the
lost a
art
lot of
circle
weight.
for being
Her
cold and
complexion
aloof.
wasn't very good either. Her petite
But
and
today,
exquisite body seemed
Sissy
even
seemed
more
to be in a
frail than
particularly
before.
good mood.
It was autumn,
Not
and
only
it was
did she
getting
talk a
colder.
lot,
Yi
but she even
Qianqian
sent
was
a
wearing
love
a
pack.
beige sleeveless
This
short
made the
skirt
painters
that he
feel
had never
extremely
seen
flattered.
before.
At
At
the
the
same
same
time,
time,
they
in the
immediately
past,
started to reflect on
Shinjilia
themselves.
would have carried her over.
Did they do
and
anything
scolded
wrong
her
to
while
make this
warming
guy
her up?
start to set up a
Then,
trap for them?
he would have carried
Yi
her
Qianqian
home
was
and tucked her
speechless.
into bed.
The work
But he couldn't do
accumulated
that
over the
anymore.
past few days
Shinjilia
wasn't
stretched out his
something that
hand,
could be done easily.
but in the end,
as
he didn't
expected,
reach it. He worked
Yi
overtime
Qianqian
until
forced
9
herself
p.m.
to
to
calm
calm
down. She looked up and forced a smile. "Thank you. Goodbye."
Chapter
She turned
1805
around, and suddenly,
when she
a
took
cold
the evening
wind
bus
blew
home.
over.
She
It
was
made Yi
exhausted.
Qianqian's body
When
tremble.
she opened the door,
Shinjilia's
she found
throat
that the
became
lights
more
in
and
the
more
house were
uncomfortable.
Yi
His heart
Qianqian's
felt
heart
like it was
skipped a
being
beat,
squeezed by a
and
hand.
she felt her body
He
tremble.
wanted to go forward.
It was daytime
but his
when she went
rationality
out,
stopped him.
so it was
In the
impossible
end,
for
he couldn't
someone
help
to
but
forget
call
to
out,
turn off the lights.
"Qianqian."
Therefore,
Yi Qianqian
the
stopped
lights
in her
must have been
tracks
turned
and
on at
straightened
night.
her body.
Yi
She
Qianqian's
didn't
hair
look back
stood on
and
end.
forced herself to
She
be
stood
calm.
at the door and
What's
stared
the
at the
matter?
house.
I really
She
love
didn't
you.
dare to move or
Shen
go in.
Julia's voice was a
However,
little low.
there was no
Yi
movement
Qianqian's
inside.
ears felt the cold
Yi
wind,
Qianqian swallowed
but
a
his faint
mouthful of
words fell
saliva
clearly into
and
her
finally
ears.
decided to
A
brace
cold
herself
arrow
to
pierced
walk
through
in.
the heart.
She took
It
small
was fatal
steps
and
carefully.
chilling.
Yi
Creak.
Qianqian
It was
straightened
the
her
sound
back
of the
and
door
strode
opening.
forward.
Yi
A
Qianqian
taxi
was
came
so
from the
scared that
opposite
her whole
direction.
body almost
Yi
jumped up.
Qianqian stopped
She
it
turned
and got
her
in,
head
and
she
saw a
didn't
man
dare to look
standing
back at
behind
him
her.
again.
Shen
Some
Julia
people
raised
in
his
some
eyebrows
things
slightly
once
when he
left
saw her
behind
stiff
would be
expression.
inextricably
When Yi
entangled
Qianqian
in
saw
a
him,
frenzy.
she was a
So
little
be it.
surprised and
Once
said,
was enough for a bloody
Shen
betrayal.
Julia seemed to
When
have
she
taken a
returned
shower.
home,
He was wearing a light blue top and beige shorts,
saw a beautiful bathtub.
He looked very homely.
It was rectangular.
His hair was half
and
dry,
lit with beautiful
but he looked very clean.
lights.
The fragrance of shower gel permeated his body.
Fingers swimming
Looking
in
at
it.
Yi Qianqian's
The green
face,
kelp slowly
Shen
floated
Julia
with the
walked
waves.
over, and the
Yi
dark
Qianqian's
red
body
coral
was
opened and
tense and
closed.
stiff.
It was
She
beautiful.
looked at him and blinked.
Everything was how
Shen
she had
Julia
imagined
stood
it
in
to
front
be,
of her for a
but her
moment
heart
and
felt as
stared
if it
into
had
her
been
eyes.
stabbed several
After
times.
a moment,
Tears
his gaze
flowed
moved away from
uncontrollably.
her eyes
I
and
really
landed
love
on her
you.
lips.
Yi
Qianqian's
Qianqian's
heart
heart
suddenly
suddenly
skipped a beat.
I don't care.
What
Yi
is he going to
Qianqian
do?
squatted down.
Is he going to kiss
curled
me
up
the
on
moment he
ground,
comes?
and burst into
Yi
tears?
Qianqian's face
She
became
didn't know
hot,
how much time
and her
had
bare
passed
face
before
began
she
to
finally
redden
got
at a
up.
speed visible
She
to the
wiped away
naked
her
eye.
tears, took
However,
a shower,
Shen
and lay
Julia's
down on the
eyes
bed.
only lingered on
Go
her
to
face
sleep.
for a while.
When he woke up,
Then
tomorrow
he turned
was a new
around
day.
and unintentionally
In the
muttered.
morning,
Yi
Yi Qianqian was
closed
woken
the
up
door.
by a phone call.
As he spoke,
It was the
he had
landline
already
at home.
walked to the door.
Yi Qianqian got up
and
and
felt
lazily
a little
picked up the
embarrassed,
phone in her
and
slippers.
her face became even
Hello.
redder.
She
She clenched
are
her
you awake?
fists in anger.
It was Yi
stomped her
Zhenhua.
feet, and gritted
just
her
woke
teeth.
up.
She
Today is the
shouted,
weekend.
"Why are you
So
here?"
I planned to sleep
There
a
was
little
no
longer.
sound behind her.
Oh, when Yi
By the way,
Qianqian turned
do you know
around
about
angrily,
Fang Tongtong's
she
return
suddenly
to
bumped
Yintown?
into a wall of flesh.
When she heard Fang
Shen
Tongtong's
Julia's body
name,
didn't move.
Yi Qianqian's
Just as Yi
drowsiness
Qianqian
disappeared.
was about to retreat,
She focused her gaze
Shen
and calmly
Julia suddenly
replied,
reached out
"Yeah," and wrapped his arms around her.
I heard that you
holding
broke
her
up with
tightly
Shen.
against his chest.
How did you know?
Yi
Looks like
Qianqian
it's
felt
true.
as if her heart
Yi
had
Zhenhua
skipped a
sighed.
beat.
I
She
didn't
almost
expect
forgot
little
to breathe.
Shen to be such
His
an
body
honest
tensed
person.
up as he stared
I
at
didn't
Shen
expect
Julia's
him
light
to be
blue
such a
top,
person
not
behind
daring
the
to
scenes.
move.
No matter
Didn't
what
you ask me to
Tong
come?
Tong is your friend.
Are you trying to play
Great.
dumb now?
Now she's even
Shen
your
Julia
friend.
lowered his
Yi
head
Qianqian was
and looked
silent.
at Yi Qianqian's
After a
pink
while
face.
she asked,
His eyes darkened.
Dad, what do you know?
I didn't.
What do I know?
Without
It's
waiting
almost
for Yi
spread throughout the
Qianqian to
town.
finish her sentence,
They're saying that your
Shen
boyfriend
Julia
raped Fang
suddenly
Tong
closed
Tong
the distance
and ruined her
between them
chastity
and stared
How
at
could
Yi
he do such a
Qianqian with
thing?
his amber eyes.
Yi Qianqian widened her
Qianqian
eyes
couldn't
when she
say
heard
anything
that.
else.
Wan
She
Lily,
looked at Shen
your
Julia,
man cheated,
and her heart
What are you
was
going to
beating
do?
incredibly fast.
Chapter 1789.
This wasn't the
What do I
first
know?
time he had gotten
It's
so
almost
close.
spread throughout the town.
But why was he so
They're
nervous?
saying that your boyfriend
Yi
raped Fang
Qianqian felt like she
Tong
was going
and
crazy.
ruined her chastity.
But when she looked at
How could he
Shen
do
Julia,
such a thing?
she couldn't help but want to
Qianqian's
get
eyes
closer to
widened
him
when she heard that.
Yi Qianqian
What?
stood on her
Yi
tiptoes
Qianqian
and couldn't
kissed his
believe
lips.
it. It was like a
like
dragonfly
Tong
skimming the surface of the water.
How is that possible?
But it was enough to
Yi
arouse a
Zhenhua
certain
clapped his
man
hands
who had
when
been
he heard
restless
that.
for a long time.
That's right.
The
How is
impulse
that
that he had been
possible?
restraining
Shen is
for
a
a long
very
time
upright
immediately
person.
surged
How
out
could he
under
do
this
such a
gentle
thing?
kiss.
Exactly.
And he could no longer
Yi
suppress it.
Qianqian
held her forehead. She was both angry and amused. At the same time, she was
Chapter
filled with anger.
1806.
Yi
Who said that?
Qianqian gasped under the
Asterisk
pressure.
CK.
Without
Today,
warning, her
I
mouth
finally
was
know what it
attacked.
means to spread
Shen
falsehoods.
Julia's passion seemed
Not
to be
only
even
that,
more ferocious
but they
than
also
before.
said that you're a bad
Under
person.
such intense
They
pressure,
said that you brought
Yi
Fang
Qianqian
Tong
almost
into the
couldn't
tiger's
breathe.
den.
She
Causing
turned her
her
face
to
to
lose
lose
her
her chastity
chastity
and chastity.
Shen Julia
You even
immediately
stirred up
moved
a lot
away
of
from her
unhappiness
lips
and used
Now
his
she's
teeth
staying
to
at
tear
home.
open her neckline.
Her mother talks to
Yi
everyone she
Qianqian
sees.
cried out in surprise
scolds
and
you
very
immediately
harshly
covered her chest.
I couldn't stand
But
it
Shen
anymore.
Julia had
so I
already
argued
reached
with
out
her
his
once
claws
and
and
ravaged
ravaged
them
them
with
with
grew
ease.
angrier as he
Shen
spoke.
Julia lifted the hem
How
of
can
her
there
shirt
be such a person
and
in
reached
this
his
world?
hand inside.
I used to think that their family
Stop.
was pretty good.
Yi
But
Qianqian
now
covered
it's
her
like this.
body.
Why
She
doesn't
felt
she
so
say
nervous
that her daughter
she was about
seduced
to
my future
suffocate.
son-in-law?
They hadn't
It
seen
takes
each
two
other for
hands
so
to clap.
long.
Was
If
it really
Fang Tong
appropriate for
wasn't
them to
willing
be
to
so
be with him,
passionate as soon as
Shen
they
wouldn't
arrived?
have been able to do
Besides,
anything to her.
Besides,
Yi
didn't they
Qianqian
break
laughed
up bitterly when
if they
she
were to
heard
go to
that?
bed at such
Yi
a time?
Zhenhua sighed. What kind of
Qianqian,
relationship did
no
they
matter
have?
what,
Yi
you can't
Qianqian
be
had
with him
hundreds of
anymore after
concerns
what
in her
happened.
heart.
But
This
when
kind
the
of
words
man
came
is
to her
fickle.
mouth, they became.
Today it's Tong Tong.
I haven't showered
But tomorrow
yet.
it might be
Shen
someone
Julia
else.
laughed out loud.
It's better to break
He pressed
up.
his whole body against
Dad, I
hers
know
and
what I'm
said in
doing.
a low voice.
It's just a pity.
I don't mind.
Shen is a good kid. He's good-looking,
Yi Qianqian
hard-working,
didn't even have a chance
eloquent,
to
and
struggle
well-educated.
before she was pressed
I don't
down by
believe
him
that Shen would
and
do
stripped
something
of all
like
her
this.
clothes.
They hadn't
Qianqian
seen
was
each other
silent.
for more than 10 days.
I think it's unbelievable
They hadn't
too.
lived together
Hey,
for nearly a month.
If you don't have anything
Shen
going
Julia
on this
couldn't
weekend,
stand it
go home.
anymore. Your
Now that that the little
isn't
sheep
in
was
good
in
health.
front of him.
Recently,
How could the
he's
big
been on
wild
a
wolf
drip.
not eat her?
I didn't tell you
Julia
because you're
wrapped her
busy
up
with work
and carried her into the
Yi
room.
Jianhua's voice
Yi
was slow and
felt
gentle.
like she was floating.
Grandfather might
After
be
she
here
was
in the
placed
next
on the
2
bed.
days.
Come back
Julia
to see
pressed
him.
down on her.
He misses you very much.
Before she could react,
Yi
she felt her
eyes
body
reddened
swell.
and she nodded.
The feeling of being filled made
Ever
Yi
since
Qianqian
Grandma passed
almost
away,
cry out.
Grandpa's
Yi
health had not
Qianqian
been
opened
very
her
good.
blurry eyes.
2 years
and
of
looked at
dementia had been
Shen Julia in front of
torturous.
her.
Yi
She gasped
Qianqian
and
was
asked,
already aware of
"Is
the
it
old
too
man's
fast?"
condition.
Shen Julia
However,
leaned over her
if he
and
were to
whispered
return
into
at
her
this
ear,
critical juncture,
"I won't.
It would be
With a
hard to
wicked
avoid
smile,
some gossip.
Shinjilia pressed
After
his
some
lips
thought,
against hers and
Yi
whispered,
Qianqian gave
"You're
Yi
already
a call."
prepared."
Over the past few days,
heart sank.
Fong Tongtong had become the talk of the
turned
town.
even redder.
In the past,
She pinched his
the
hand.
people that the townspeople
Shinjilia
talked
had an
about
even
the
better
most
way
were
to
those
punish
with
her.
bright futures.
He pressed down on
This
her
was
heavily.
the first time that
Yi
everyone
Qianqian
was
gasped
talking
and
about
screamed.
him. Fong
She threw her head
Tongtong
back
felt that she
and
was
hugged his
extremely
back.
shameless.
Shinjilia
She had
sealed her
used
lips
her
with
mother's
his.
mouth to vilify
Wordlessly,
Yi Qianqian
he began
for the
to
past
move with
few
all
days.
his might.
When it was almost
By
over,
now,
Yi
almost
Qianqian
everyone in
panted
town
heavily
knew
and
that Yi
stuttered.
Qianqian had
What
betrayed
kind of
her friend
relationship
for the sake of
do we
glory.
have?
In order to break
Shinjilia
up,
didn't say a word.
she had pushed Yi
He quickly
Qianqian to
pushed her to the
Shinjilia
highest heaven
and then
once
dumped
again.
her man.
Finally,
It was also the
he
first
sank down
time
heavily
Fong
and asked in a hoarse
realized how
voice,
terrifying the
"What do you
term
think?"
spreading rumors
think
could be. She
verbal
felt that they were a
violence
little
was far more
embarrassed.
unbearable
They had clearly
than a direct
broken up,
physical attack,
and they hadn't even officially gotten back together yet.
But they
Chapter
had already rolled
1790.
into bed together.
When Fong
What was
Tongtong heard
this?
her mother's words,
Didn't we already
she was
break
stunned.
up?
She looked at her mother in disbelief and asked,
"You're not my boyfriend
Why
anymore,
did she come
so
back?
Isn't it bad
she
for us
waiting
to
to
be
be
like
criticized
this?"
for coming back at
Shinjilia
this
wasn't
time?
in a hurry to leave.
At the same time,
Instead,
Fong
he embraced
Tongtong
her
thought
and
of another
kissed her gently
possibility
on the lips.
Could it be
In
that?
a soft voice,
Yi
he said,
Qianqian came
"You're
back
not
to
young
settle
anymore.
scores with me?
Do you want to consider
Bullshitting
getting a
a husband?"
husband?"
Anger
Yi
flashed
Qianqian
across
was
Lady
exhausted,
Fong's face as
but
she
when
said,
she heard his words,
she even wants to
she
settle
immediately
accounts
felt
with you.
energized.
You should be
She
thankful
opened
that
her
I didn't
eyes and
settle
looked at
accounts
him.
with her.
Her mood
If she
seemed to have
hadn't
been
taken you
refreshed.
to her house to live,
It's okay if he's
would
not
such
your
a thing have
boyfriend.
happened?
He can be
That
your
girl
husband,
is really
the
despicable.
father of your child,
Mom,
and the head of
Fong
your family in the
Tongtong felt
future.
a little embarrassed. You clearly knew that wasn't the case. Now that you've said that, everyone
Chapter
is talking about
1807.
us.
If that's
Shinjilia
the
gazed
case,
at her.
won't
and
everyone
raised
think
his
that I've
eyebrows
been
slightly.
fooled?
Are
Yi
you still my
Qianqian
mom?
stared at him and asked,
Fong Tongtong
"Are you
felt a little
proposing?"
embarrassed. What do you know? Shinjilia
Mrs.
was
Fong
very
reached
short.
out.
His
and
lips
pointed a
tightened
finger
as
at
he slowly
Fong
and
Tongtong's
confidently
head.
said.
She sounded
This
a
is
little
the last
exasperated
time.
at Fong
What he
Tongtong's
meant was
failure
that if Yi
to live up to
Qianqian
her
didn't
expectations,
agree, he wouldn't bring
if
it
I
up
didn't
again.
say that,
Or
would
perhaps
this matter
what
have blown up?
Shinjilia meant was
Don't you
that
like
right
that
now,
guy?
at this very
If
moment,
this matter didn't
he wanted
blow
to
up,
end things
would you
with
still
her.
be with him?
Either forever
Would he have
together,
broken up with Yi
or not
Qianqian?
together at all. But even if
Yi
you blew
Qianqian
things up
wrapped
to this
her arms
point,
around his neck
my
and
reputation will
kissed him
still
on the
be in
lips.
tatters, she asked.
The more Fong
What about
Tongtong
your
thought
ring?
about it,
The
when
more aggrieved she
Shinjilia heard
felt.
that,
She
the
scolded.
tightened line on his
Why
lips
do I have a
finally
mother
relaxed.
like you?
Do
When
you
he
know
saw
that
that
people
Yi
are pointing
Qianqian's
fingers at me
complexion
the
looked
moment
much
I
better,
step out of the house?
he smiled and reached
Even if
out
this
to touch
matter
the
wasn't
top of her
true,
head.
it has
Yi
become
Qianqian
true.
shrank back a little.
Silly girl.
Then, as
Mom
if
is
by
doing
magic,
this for your own
Shinjilia
good.
took out
Did
a velvet
Yi
box.
Qianqian break up with that
Yi
man?
Qianqian widened her eyes in
nodded her
disbelief.
head.
She
Her
just
eyes were
casually
slightly
mentioned
red.
it. She
That's
didn't
right.
expect this guy
Call
to
that
have
man
already
and ask
prepared
him.
it. Now that
Shinjilia
everyone knows
pulled
about the
himself
two
up
of you, and the
See what
feeling
he
of
wants
being
to
filled
do.
disappeared
When
in
Fong
an instant.
Tongtong heard that,
Yi
she
Qianqian
pursed
felt
her
her whole
lips.
body tremble.
Tears rolled down
She put her
cheeks,
legs down and
but she
shrank
still
back.
nodded her head.
Shinjilia
It was
grabbed
early
her left
autumn.
hand
It was
and stuffed the
drizzling,
ring onto
and the
her
wind
ring
was
finger.
strong.
It
That
made people
settled
feel
then.
tired and
Come
bleak.
with me to the
It was
capital
rare
this
for Yi
weekend.
Qianqian to
Today
come
was
home
Wednesday,
and see
there
so
were
many
only 2
people in
days
the
left.
yard. It
However,
was very lively.
Yi Qianqian's
Yi
focus
Yu
wasn't on
and Li
that.
Jinan followed
Instead,
behind Yi Qianqian.
she was looking at the
They
diamond
walked in
ring on her
quietly,
finger,
leaning against
It was
each other.
beautiful.
The
And the
people who
diamond
came
was huge.
and went were all
It sparkled
relatives she
brightly
hadn't seen
and
in a long
dazzled Yi
time.
Qianqian's
When they
eyes.
saw Yi Qianqian,
Do you like it?
some of them
Shinjilia
whispered to each
interlocked
other,
his fingers with
while
hers,
others merely
and his
nodded
gaze
and
fell on
smiled
her
before
fingers.
walking past
Yi
her.
Qianqian smiled and nodded.
Knew that
I
the
like
only
it.
reason they
A
were
smile
paying
appeared
attention
on
to
Shinjilia's
her was
face.
because of
There's
the
one
recent
more.
rumors. He picked
Moreover,
up the box and saw
it was
a
a
man's
rumor
ring
that was
inside.
bad for him.
Help me put
Yi
it on.
Qianqian turned a
Yi
blind eye to
Qianqian
it.
picked up the ring.
She walked
and
straight
looked
into
at
her
Shinjilia's
grandfather's room.
outstretched hand.
His father was
She
looking at
clasped
his
the ring on his
grandfather.
ring finger and
The
asked,
old man was lying
"When
on the
did you
bed.
buy this?"
His hair was
very
snow
early,
white,
and
as
his
long
eyes
as you
were
nod,
deeply sunken.
I can take it out
He
at
looked
any
a little
time.
scary.
But his
Shinjilia
eyes
looked
were
at his
still
hand
kind.
with satisfaction, and the
When he
smile
saw
on his
Yi
face
Qianqian
widened.
come in,
Yi
he called
Qianqian
out in a
suddenly
hoarse
felt
voice,
guilty.
"Qianqian."
She had rejected him
Yi
so many
Qianqian's
times,
eyes reddened,
but
She stepped
Shinjilia
forward
remained
and took
same
the old
spot.
man's withered hand
Fortunately,
from
he was still at
and
the
called
same
out,
spot.
"Grandpa."
Fortunately,
He didn't go
followed
far,
behind
and
and walked forward
fortunately,
as well.
he gave
She
himself
didn't have
one
any
last
feelings
chance
for
to
this
make a
old
choice.
man.
But
She
at this
crawled up and
time,
hugged him.
she still felt a
"Thank
little
you, old
sad.
Shun.
When
Why
the
do you
old
have to
man
be
saw
so nice to
Yu,
me?"
he tried his best
Shinjilia
to smile
asked.
and called out.
Shinjilia hugged her
"Yu."
back.
His
Tears
gaze
welled
was
up in
gentle
her
as he
eyes.
whispered,
"Grandpa
"You're worth
still
it."
remembers me.
It was simple and clear.
It was rare for Shinjilia to say
Chapter
something like that.
1791.
Yi Qianqian
Li
felt
Jin
like
walked
laughing
forward
and crying at
and
the
looked
same
at the
time.
old man
Yi
as he
Qianqian
gently
hugged him
squatted
tighter
down.
and sobbed
"Grandpa,
softly.
I'm Xiaonan,"
She said,
"I'm
"I'm
Yu's
sorry.
husband, your
I didn't
grandson-in-law.
trust you at all. Don't worry.
I thought everything
I'll
Fong
treat
Tong
Dad
Tong
and
said
you
was
well."
true.
It
I
was
never
simple
doubted
but
her.
sincere and
"I'm
powerful.
sorry, old Shun.
He didn't know how to
She
speak
told
the
you that I
dialect
slept
of
with
Yin
her?"
Town.
and he didn't know if Yi Jianhua could understand him.
But
every word he said was sincere, and looked at her with a dark
translated
expression.
For Grandpa.
Yi Qianqian
Grandpa nodded his head
She told
with a
me
smile.
that what happened that
The old
night
man
with you
looked
was
very
just an
spirited.
accident.
His cloudy
She felt
eyes
sorry for me.
reflected the
So I,
vicissitudes of life and experience
and
that
he
were
asked
different from
unhappily,
those of an ordinary
"How could you
person.
believe something like
He
that?"
looked at Yi Qianqian and patted
She
her
grew
hand
up
as
with
he
me.
said,
"I don't think she would
Qianqian,
lie to me
you're
on
a sensible
purpose.
child.
Don't care what outsiders say. You're my good granddaughter." Yi Qianqian was
Chapter
stunned when she heard
1808.
that. She couldn't hold back her tears any
and
longer.
lowered her head.
Grandpa,
Not daring to look
Grandpa
at him.
is most worried
Shen
about
Julia
you.
was so
You're
angry
an
that he
impulsive
gritted
child
his
who
teeth and
refuses
said,
to submit
"You're
to
going to
others,
piss me off.
and your mouth is unforgiving.
Men, aren't they
There are
animals
many
that
things
think
in
with
this
their lower
world
bodies
that we mortals can't
Tong's
predict.
figure is better
You
than
have
mine.
to learn to avoid
Her
them.
breasts are bigger
You're
than
a good
mine.
child.
Her hair
But
is
your
longer than
personality
mine.
is just like
and
your
her legs
father's.
are longer than
You
mine.
can't be like this.
Furthermore,
You
she's
have
a
to
virgin.
change in the future.
Don't you men like
Understand?
virgins?"
Yi Qianqian
nodded
tried
her
to
head.
defend herself.
"I understand,
but she
Grandpa."
realized that what she
At the
said
same
made
time,
no sense at all.
She felt that it was a
Bah,
little strange.
Weren't you a virgin
Grandpa's
when you were with
dementia
me?
over the years
Shen Julia
had
really
made it
wanted
difficult
to poke
for
her head
him to
out to see
recognize
what was
people.
inside.
He was even
Why
a
should
little
I take
muddle-headed.
responsibility for
However,
your best
it was
friend's
rare to see
virginity?
someone so
Not to
spirited
mention
and
that I've never
articulate like
touched
this.
her.
Even if I
Jianhua,
did,
Grandpa's
you're the one
voice
who
was still
invited
very
the wolf into
spirited.
the house.
He looked at Yi
You know
Jianhua
that your
and
man
said,
is infinitely
"I've lived
charming.
for so long,
Yet you still
and the
dare
person
to
I'm
bring
most
another
worried
woman
about
to
is
me.
Qianqian.
Aren't you digging
It's
a
my
hole for
regret
yourself?"
that I didn't get to
Yi
see her get
Qianqian
married.
rolled her eyes at him.
Jianhua, you must
That's
marry
because
her
Fong
off in
Tongtong
style.
hasn't seen the
Dad,
world
don't
yet.
worry.
Shen
All right,
Julia
your
said
mother
in
is
annoyance.
waiting for me. Wait a
I'll
minute.
make a move first.
Shen Julia realized
When the old
that the
man
topic
said
had
that,
gone astray.
he looked at the
So
top
he
of the
quickly
bed with a
changed the
smile on
subject.
his face.
Where did you
Don't
get that
cry
idea
after I
from?
leave.
Do you
I'm
think
with
all
your
men like
grandmother
to be
again.
single?
When those words were
Isn't
said,
that what normal
it
men
made them
think?
want to cry even
Yi
more.
Qianqian asked
At the
with her
same
eyes
time,
wide open.
They couldn't help
She really
but look
thought
up at
so.
the top of the
Didn't
bed.
all men like
there was
all
nothing
kinds
up
of
there.
virgins?
But the
Shen
old
Julia
man's
was
eyes were
speechless.
filled with extreme
He
affection.
suppressed his anger and
Soon,
said,
the old
"You
man
really
closed
don't
his
understand
eyes.
men."
He left.
The kind of men
The
you're
old
talking
man had
about are
lived a
called
peaceful
scumbags.
life. He was
Only
upright and
scumbags
friendly.
like to break
He
women's
loved his
virginity.
wife dearly,
It's
even
like
more
collecting
so.
stamps.
Now the old
I'm a
couple
good
could
man.
finally reunite.
Besides,
When you
however,
say a virgin,
the room was filled
other
with
than
cries of
dirtying the
grief.
sheets,
The
there's
news of
nothing
the old
special
man's
about
death
it.
spread very
Do
quickly
you really
in
think
town.
so?
Yi
What do you
Qianqian's
think?
grandfather
Yi
was very
Qianqian
prestigious
turned away.
in town.
The more she
Coupled
listened,
with Yi
the more
Jianhua's
guilty
fame,
she felt.
it didn't take
In
long
reality,
for the news to spread.
Yi Qianqian
There was
the
a
one
big
who
banyan
trusted
tree
Fong Tongtong
at the
more.
most densely
It had nothing
populated
to
part
do
of
with
the
whether
town.
he was a man
There
or
was
not.
a small shop
Their
under the big
relationship
banyan
had been
tree.
maintained for
When
more than
Fong
10
Tongtong
years.
heard the passersby
After such a
talking
long
about it,
time,
she was
it had
amazed.
almost become a habit.
Before Yi Qianqian returned,
Unthinkingly and
there had been no
instinctively
news
believe
of the old man.
It wasn't that Yi Qianqian didn't trust
Yi
Shen Julia
Qianqian
enough,
had just returned
but
when
that
she
she
heard
trusted
someone
Fong
mention
Tongtong too much.
that old Master
That was
Shen
why
had
such
left.
a situation
Was
had
old
occurred.
Master Shen
But now,
specifically
he
waiting
laughed
for Yi
dryly and
Qianqian?
said,
At
"Normal
this
men
moment,
don't think like
Mrs.
you."
Fong rushed
Shen
back from
Julia
outside.
suppressed it and said
After
in a low
she
voice,
entered, she told
"Don't you know
Fong
whether I'm
Tongtong,
normal or not?
"You'll look for Yi
Yi
Qianqian
Qianqian
later."
blushed.
How
Fong
would I know?
Tongtong was baffled
It's
and
not
asked,
like I've ever had
"Why
another
would I
man."
look for her?"
Shen Julia was quite satisfied with her answer.
Chapter
He lifted the
1792
blanket and covered
Fong
himself
Tongtong
with it.
was silent.
Then he
Her
wrapped his
biological
entire body
grandfather
around
had
her
passed
and said,
away.
"She
I haven't
must
had
be
any
sad."
other women
Fong
either.
Tongtong
Or
had a good
even,
impression of the
"Aya,
old man.
don't crush
He
me,
was
you're
always
too heavy."
smiling and
The
looked
relationship
amiable.
between
When
husband
she
and
heard
wife
what her
is
mother
built by
said,
pressure.
Fong Tongtong
If you don't
glanced at
pressure
her.
them,
Let's
how are
wait
you
for a
going to
while.
nurture your
They
relationship?
must be very busy right now.
They don't have time for me.
I'm so
Let's
sleepy.
go tomorrow. Shen Julia
Sounds
didn't
good.
give her a chance
Mrs.
to
Fong
speak.
nodded.
He grabbed
Sure.
her roughly.
You can give
and
them
started
some
a
money.
new round of
Do
war
you
with
have
her.
it?
Yi
Yeah, I know
Qianqian
what I'm
struggled
doing.
and finally
It
avoided
wasn't the
his
first
lips.
time the family
She
had a
gasped and
funeral.
shouted. When her
Condom.
grandmother passed away,
Once I'm pregnant,
Yi
I'll give birth.
Qianqian had experienced
No.
the same hardships.
Getting married and having
the elders
children
and relatives
is a matter
all
of
came
course.
to pay their respects.
You've already worn the ring.
And they all looked at
And
her
now
with
you want to go
prejudice.
back on your words?
Yi Qianqian
Then I'll
pretended
return
not
the
to
ring
see
to
them
you.
and remained
too late.
silent.
Shen
After
Julia
half a
pushed
day of
against
work,
her and
it was
filled her
already
up.
noon.
From
the
the
moment
moment
you
you
still
nodded,
very hot.
You can't go
Her
back on your
grandfather's
words
body
anymore.
was frozen in
What
the
will
crystal
happen if I
coffin.
go back on my
Under
words?
such
such high temperatures,
I'll let you have
it
children.
wouldn't cool down too quickly. In just one day and one night, Yi Qianqian had the illusion that the door was about to be trampled by people. Yi Qianqian lowered her head to look at the man in front of her. Someone shouted. A soft moan came from her throat. Back stiffened. All her words were drowned out by his overwhelming strength. She saw Feng Tongtong walking in. When Yi Qianqian's alarm clock rang, face was expressionless. She felt that she hadn't slept for long. She looked at Yi Qianqian. She turned over in a daze and suddenly felt that something was wrong with her body. Yi Qianqian felt a little sarcastic. She turned her head to look at her side after my relationship with my boyfriend was ruined. At the same time, was back. The people around them also was awakened by her sudden reaction. There was bound to be a lot of people when he saw her horrified expression. When the family held a funeral, out and hugged her. Yi Qianqian glanced at them. His lazy voice carried the faint huskiness of a man who hadn't woken up yet. Is there anything I can help you with? A beat. No. She blinked her eyes. If you really want to help, Xinjulia held her in his arms and asked softly, "There are too many things." And many people have shrank back and looked down. I don't have time to tidy up now. She saw that both of their bodies were bare. Felt like she was being ordered around. Time to get up and go to work. She didn't show it on her face. Lie down a little longer. She nodded her head. Xinjulia's voice was calm. Do what she was told. He rested his chin on her smooth shoulder to each other when they saw the scene. Most of them were felt her skin itch from his caress. There was no lack of people watching the show. She shrank her neck and pushed his face away. Yi Qianqian knew that. Go away. And didn't want to bother with her. Over and kissed her lips. Very busy. Yi Qianqian struggled for a while. What she was busy with. When she realized she didn't know whether it was entertaining guests, she gave up, or other miscellaneous matters. Reluctantly held her in his arms. She found it very troublesome. After rubbing against her, he realized that he couldn't walk over to Yi Qianqian. Unknowingly, the room had blocked off all sounds contaminated with the body of fire. What's the matter? That originally calm and tranquil body lazily on the stool. After a short while, not even looking at her, stood upright. I want to apologize to you. Could clearly feel the change. I didn't know that the rumors outside would spread like this. These words can't be said by me. It's just a rumor. To the back and shouted, "How could such an exaggerated thing be possible?" Xinjulia was amused by Yi Qianqian's blushing face. He rested his head on one hand. Old Shen isn't blind. How could he possibly like with a red face? He teased. When Fang Tongtong heard that, it's not like I haven't seen it before. She looked at Yi Qianqian. I've seen what I should have seen. And done what I shouldn't have done. Don't go overboard. What's there to be shy about? I know what kind of person you are. Yi Qianqian's face and you know what kind of person I am. She felt uncomfortable. I'm only apologizing to Xinjulia because I feel sorry for you. I'm just not such a foul mouth. Why did you suddenly come back? Yi Qianqian burst out laughing. Xinjulia lifted the blanket. Are you with Xinjulia? And was about to get out of bed. Remember to prepare for the trip to the capital. Chapter 1793. I'll let my family know when I get back. Since you insist on doing this, you're not coming with me, I won't say anything else. Yi Qianqian looked at the truth and the lie were separated by a single thought. Xinjulia boldly stood up. Yi Qianqian would never know that she was to cover himself at all. Finding out the truth of the matter. She turned her head away in embarrassment. Fang Tongtong turned around. When Xinjulia clenched her fists, he couldn't help but laugh. Xinjulia was in a good mood. Yi Qianqian looked at Fang Tongtong's back. And found it back to the capital now. There's still a lot of work to do. Fang stopped in her tracks yesterday afternoon and turned around to look at Yi Qianqian. No way. Yi Qianqian's eyes glanced at her indifferently. You'll get your comeuppance. What do you think? Fang Tongtong was dismissive. Thank you for your kind words. She felt that Xinjulia had just been transferred to the capital, Yi Qianqian's house. So there were bound to be a lot of things to do. I'm not the only one at fault in this matter. Since he had flown back from the imperial capital, Xinjulia he must have skipped a lot of procedures in the process to take advantage of the situation. There would probably be a lot of things to settle. I didn't succeed in entering the relationship. Could figure it out. Yi Qianqian was so convinced. Had already walked up to her. This could only mean that their love couldn't stand the test when she saw his nakedness. Who was to blame? From another perspective, Yi Qianqian and Xinjulia had to thank Fang Tongtong. Chapter 18:10. They thought that they could talk about marriage, Yi Qianqian looked at him without saying a word. It couldn't stand when you said you wanted to meet wind and rain. I almost lost my mind. It was good that they broke up. At that time, least they didn't have to stay together and torture each other. But I still went to the airport without hesitation. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that she was right. Yi Qianqian's heart palpitated. House to Yi Qianqian's house. Xinjulia. They had to pass through a small forest. Unfamiliar with him. The small forest would never say such things in the cultivated in town. Or rather, the plants that were cultivated there were very emotional in the past. Fang Tongtong was afraid that people would think that she was there to steal. When I arrived in Kingstown, she passed by. I didn't call you. However, this path was waited in the house for you to get off work. Although it was a little remote, but I felt like an outsider. It still saved her a lot of time. Xinjulia gently stroked her chin. So the surroundings were wet. To you last night. A gust of wind blew. The two explicit words made small trees feel like her whole body was about to crumble from the wind. Her scalp went numb, like she was freezing, and her face turned red. Suddenly, I felt like I was raping you instead of making love to my own woman. Suddenly felt a little creeped out. Gently placed her hand on his waist and asked, Yi Qianqian's house. Why would you have such thoughts? There was a dead person in her house. Yi Qianqian, I love you so much. Xinjulia held her hand and gazed at her with a pair of amber eyes. He whispered, felt I don't know what I mean all over, but I still took out he's already here. This is the last time. Fang Tongtong hugged her arm. If you agree to marry me, was about to make a run together forever. When a huge force suddenly came from behind, what will happen to you? And pulled her back. I'll go back. Fang Tongtong's eyes widened. Pinched her chin. At the same time, she shrieked to hers. Ah! I'll never
Before
come
her
to
voice
Kingstown
could travel
again.
far.
I'll never
Fong
see you again.
Tongtong's mouth was covered.
Shinjulia gazed at
Fong
her with a
Tongtong's
serious
entire
expression.
body was restrained by a
Qianqian's
huge
heart
force
tightened
that came out
and
of
a
nowhere.
sense of nervousness
Her body
followed.
was suspended in the air.
So this is really the last
and
time.
Fong Tongtong
Yi
did not feel
Qianqian
the
held his
slightest
face in
sense
her
of
hands,
security. Stood on
she
her
struggled
tiptoes
with all her
and
might,
kissed him on the lips.
but the force seemed to have
Let's
locked
get married.
onto her.
And did
Shinjulia's
not
heart
loosen
fluttered.
at all.
He
Then
wrapped
he was
his arms
thrown
around
to the
her
ground
waist
and pushed her against the wall.
It didn't take long
he
for
couldn't
Fong
help but be
Tongtong to be
entangled
drenched
with her.
in mud.
The high-quality
Before Fong
mattress was
Tongtong
shaken
could
by
react,
them for a long
she caught a
time
glimpse
before
of
they
a dark
stopped.
shadow pressing
Yi
down on
Qianqian
her.
was late again
Help.
as expected.
The
Fong
chief
Tongtong
editor
stood
struggled
at the
with
door
all
of
her
the
might,
office with an
but her
ugly
mouth was
expression on
covered
her
by
face
his
and
hand.
roared. She
Yi
couldn't put up a
Qianqian,
fight. You're
wifey,
getting more and more
I've
out
been
of
looking
hand.
for you for a
Do
long
you know
time.
what you've done? Why did
You
you
should
run
count
away
how
with
many
someone
times
else?
you've been late
I
this
love
month.
you. I really love
Don't
you.
you know how many
Don't
days
go
of
with
leave
anyone
you've
else.
taken this month?
Come back with
If
me.
you don't finish your work,
A
how am I
middle-aged
supposed
man's
to raise
voice
your
rang in
bonus?
her ears. Yi Qianqian didn't dare to speak. She lowered her head.
Chapter
When the chief
1794.
editor saw Yi Qianqian's behavior,
Where's your sister?
she was filled
Yi
with
Zhenhua's
anger and
voice
said,
could be heard.
"Don't think
It
that you
sounded
can be
a little
willful
anxious.
just because you have
Yi
the best
Qianqian was
sales.
sleeping
There are
soundly
plenty
inside.
of people with good
She
sales.
hadn't slept for long
Don't think
before
that
she
I
was
can't do
woken up.
anything to you
She
just
squinted
because
her
you've
eyes
fallen
and
out of
frowned
love."
as she got up.
Yi
She
Qianqian
stretched
stuck
and
out her
yawned
tongue
before
and
saying,
said,
"Well,
"She's
I
with
got
her
back
husband.
together with him.
They should be out for
They've
a
gotten
walk
back
at this
together?
hour." The
Nonsense.
editor couldn't believe
Ainen
it.
is helping out outside.
Didn't you say that they broke up?
Where did your sister go?"
Yi Qianqian walked out listlessly.
Yes,
Feeling a little
but we can
tired,
still
she
get
called
back
out,
together.
"What's wrong?
You got back
Can't
together
you just
with
call
her
and
yourself?
ask?" Someone
Well,
outside
he came
is saying
looking
that
for
a
me
young
yesterday.
girl was bullied by
Yi
a crazy
Qianqian's
man.
face was a little
I'll
red.
look for her. She raised
Yi
her head
Zhenhua's
and
tone was
glanced at the
nervous.
chief editor.
He hurried to
The
find his cell
editor-in-chief
phone.
saw the obvious
Just as he was
hickey on
about
her
to
neck
make the call,
and immediately
Yi's
understood
voice
what had
came from
happened.
behind.
His expression
"What's wrong?"
darkened even
Yi
further.
walked over.
"So you two
Her belly was
reconciled after
slightly
having
bulging.
sex?" She looked
Cough,
very
cough.
pregnant. Li Jinan was right behind Yu. Although he couldn't understand what they were saying, he could
Chapter
tell that Yi
1811.
Zhenhua was very
Yi
nervous.
Qianqian
shuddered
He
and
asked,
hurried out of the
"Dad,
chief
were you
editor's
looking for
office
us?"
without
Yi
hesitation.
Zhenhua saw
But
that
just as he was about
there
to step out
and breathed a
he
sigh of
suddenly
relief.
caught a glimpse of
He
the
said,
beautiful sparkling
that you're
diamond
here.
ring on his
It's
finger.
good that you're here.
She immediately
You scared
turned
me to
back
death.
and reached out her hand.
I knew it couldn't be
"I'm
your
getting
daughter.
married soon.
I know your
Give
daughter.
me your blessings."
That girl isn't as
The
tall
chief
as your
editor
daughter.
clenched her teeth,
So I didn't see her
and almost
face.
threw her phone
But
at
she
her.
was crying so
Yi
miserably.
Qianqian quickly
Third
ducked and ran
granduncle
away.
Yi came over.
The chief editor
He seemed to
retracted
be in
her
good
hand
spirits,
and made the call
but his small
angrily.
eyes were burning
When the
with
call
the flame
went
of
through,
gossip,
she
which
changed her
made people
expression
feel
and
like
said
laughing.
pitifully. Yi
"Hubby,
Qianqian
please
pursed her
comfort
lips and
me.
asked, when Yi
Were you
Qianqian
scared
got
by the
home,
crazy man?
Shinjulia
If
was
she could be
already
mistaken
gone.
with us,
Yi
she should be
Qianqian
very
tidied up
old.
everything.
How could
and
she
lay
be
on
so
the bed.
useless?
She
How
couldn't
could
help
she be
but lift
scared
her
like
ring
this?
again and
When
wave it in
third
front of
uncle
her
Yi heard
face.
that,
He
the
looked at
corners
her
of
with
her
a
lips
too
curled up
naive expression
unconsciously.
and said, Yi
Who
Qianqian
told
lay
you
down
that she was
and hummed a
scared?
tune.
She was
She
bullied.
had been looking at it all
As he
day,
spoke,
but
he
she
seemed to
couldn't get
feel a
enough
little
of such
ashamed.
beauty.
He
She
whispered,
closed her eyes.
"In the woods on that
She could
forest
almost
path,
imagine how she
was
would look in
dragged
her
in.
wedding gown.
Don't you think she
Beautiful,
was crying?"
very beautiful.
Yi opened
It was
her
the
eyes and
weekend,
asked in
and the
Mandarin,
sun was scorching
"Could she have
hot in
been?"
Kingstown. Third
Yi
great uncle
Qianqian
turned his
packed
head
2
away
sets
with an
of clothes,
unbearable expression,
bought some
and
Kingstown
waved his
specialties
hand.
and health
This
supplements,
girl is really a
and
little
set
unlucky.
off for the capital.
Of all people,
After a 3-hour
she just had to
flight,
run into
she
that
arrived at
lunatic.
the Capital International
Lunatic.
Airport.
Yi Qianqian's
She called
curiosity was
Shinjulia
piqued
as soon as she got
Who's
off
the
the
lunatic?
plane.
It
There
rang
was
a
a young
few
man
times
called
before
Wang
Shinjulia
Shinsheng.
picked up the
He was
phone.
about the same age
It
as
sounded
you.
a little noisy
Do you
on the
remember
other
him?
end. Ah, that's
Hello,
him. I'm off
the
the
one who
plane.
moved here
Are
from
you
the
here?
neighboring town.
Oh, so fast.
He's my classmate.
I'm still at the
What's
hospital.
wrong?
I had
It's
to
that
rush
father
over
of
because of
hers.
something.
His brain
Why
was
don't you
broken
take a
by
taxi
someone,
to my hospital?
and he would recognize
It's about
anyone
40
as his
kilometers
wife.
from the airport.
I'm afraid this girl
so
is
you
ruined.
should be able to get
Yi
there in an
Qianqian
hour.
was shocked.
Give me a
His
call when you
father
arrive.
isn't that older
Yi
than my
Qianqian
father?
was a little
Almost,
disappointed.
but
Alas,
she could
his mind
imagine
is
that
not
he was
clear.
really busy.
Third uncle
That was
waved
why he
his
couldn't
hand
pick
and
her
said
up.
sympathetically,
Yi Qianqian
"How
agreed
pitiful,"
and walked
It's
out
all
on her
fate.
own.
If
She
you're
took a
unlucky
taxi and headed to the address provided by Shin Julia and didn't feel any regret. Soon she arrived at a hospital. It was still Huxing Hospital. It had nothing to do with him. Didn't call Shin Julia. Yi Qianqian clicked her tongue and shook her head. She went straight to the psychology department. Yi looked at him curiously and asked. The people around her were very busy. You can understand it. Almost no one saw her. Li Jin and Yi Qianqian pulled her small suitcase to the information desk. It's not for nothing. The nurse. Oh, that's enough. I'm looking for Shin Julia. Lin Miao Miao was in the middle of organizing some documents when she looked up and saw Yi Qianqian's face. With Chapter 1795, she recognized the person as Shin Julia's phone screensaver. She stopped in her tracks. Lin Miao Miao immediately felt uncomfortable. That person was an auntie who lived at her with a bad attitude. She was a nice person. Director Shin is busy. She was very gossipy. You can register with him first. Yi Qianqian didn't have any special feelings for this auntie, which made people very uncomfortable. Auntie.
Yi Qianqian hadn't expected the attitude of the people in the hospital to be so bad. Fong Tongtong was the only friend she had in this town that was known to the others. Although they weren't on good terms now, Lin Miao Miao deliberately sized her up and said, the auntie looked at Yi Qianqian. I've never heard of Director Shen having a girlfriend expression on her face. Also, how could Director Shen like you? Yes. Recently, go and have a look. There have been many people sent her pretending to be Director Shen's girlfriend. Yi Qianqian was shocked. How did you know him? What? How did this happen? Was infuriated. The unfortunate girl they had been gossiping about for so long was the image of a virtuous lady that she had been trying to maintain by a crazy man. How could that be possible? She said, hey, of all the places this woman could have gone, is it true that no one has complained about the hospital's information desk? No one would go there. But when she walked there today, she was bullied by that crazy B** starred. She kept bleeding down there, and there were almost a few bowls of blood. And asked, as he spoke, he waved his fists in front of her. His expression was exaggerated, but you're still here. He looked very serious. Isn't that unreasonable? Everyone who saw it was trembling with fear. She lowered her head and pretended to mutter, why would there be so much blood when it's normal in this day and age? Could it be? Each one is more shameless than the other. Yi Qianqian's heart also skipped a beat. Yi Qianqian's anger flared. Could it be that she had a miscarriage? A man in a white coat walked out from behind her. Yi Qianqian and Julia got to know each other and looked at the name tag on the young girl's chest just like that. She asked, no, that wasn't right. Your name is Lin Miao Miao. How could a normal pregnancy happen so quickly? My name is Lin Miao Miao. Felt that there was definitely something against me, don't you? Her brows knitted together tightly. Let's see what you're going to do. There's still a funeral at home. Is the attitude of the people in your hospital so bad? Yi Jianhua frowned and tugged at her. Why is the difference between Hushin Hospital and the capital and Hushin Hospital in Kingstown so big? Her mother is unreasonable. I told you to register. She might even think that you're going to see her make a fool of herself. You're the one who's sick. I said I'm here to look for Shen Julia. I'll be back soon. Shen Julia doesn't want to see anyone's hand away. Leave. She went into the house to grab her bag and walked out. She looked up at the man behind her and said, don't go. I'm Shen Julia's girlfriend. Don't get yourself into trouble. When Lin Miao Miao saw Yi Qianqian looking behind her, she went straight into the living room to retrieve the car keys and dashed out. The man glanced at Lin Miao Miao. The possibility of a miscarriage in half a month of pregnancy was not impossible. So it's you, sister-in-law. But when did Brother Shen just told me to take you to his office? Could it be that? When they first met, they already had an affair? Raised her eyebrows slightly. No, that's impossible. Her gaze shifted to Lin Miao Miao. Yi Qianqian headed in the direction of the hospital. Wouldn't the nurse at the information desk from her house to the hospital in town? Yes, Director Shen just told us. It would take about 17 minutes to get there with the battery-powered car and said, after parking the car, didn't Director Shen just tell you that his girlfriend would be coming? And he asked you to treat her asking around. What's wrong with you now? Yi Qianqian finally arrived at the gynecology department on the 9th floor. How do I know if it's real or fake? Fong Tongtong's mother was wiping away her tears in the hallway. Pretends to be Director Shen's girlfriend. Sadness and despair on her face. Exhaustion? At the same time, you scold everyone who comes looking for Shen Julia for being sick. Anger flashed across her face. You even accused them of being unreasonable. Just as she was about to speak, and calling them ugly in a roundabout way. You even invert the truth and pretend that you don't know anything. Yes. Do you have a grudge against Shen Julia? Yi Qianqian looked at Lin Miao Miao without the slightest hint of politeness on her face. Yi Qianqian heard this from outside and called the information desk. Auntie, are you sure you won't get a complaint if you treat a patient this way? Angrily. What nonsense are you talking about? I heard that something happened to Tong Tong. Don't accuse me. Yi Qianqian had run all the way here, so she was panting. His expression did not look too good. I heard from the aunt next door that she lost a lot of blood. You're representing the entire hospital's image by sitting here. Mrs. Fong had watched Yi Qianqian grow up. Don't you even want to protect the hospital's image now? Knew what kind of person she was. Dr. Li, I didn't. When she heard very well whether I have it or not. Softened a little. Yi Qianqian's expression was cold and said, "How is she now? I'll come with you. If it doesn't work, when Mrs. Fong heard this, take a look at that. She gritted her teeth but didn't say anything. Yi Qianqian pointed at the thing above her head. The doctor said, Lin Miao Miao, her hymen was torn and the walls of her vagina were injured. Lin Miao Miao's expression changed, but she's crying very hard. Are you deliberately going against me? You have to comfort her. You know very well who's going against whom. Mrs. Fong couldn't believe it. You're still young. Her hymen was torn. You must not have heard of this saying, have you? Wasn't she already? When the doctor said this, Mrs. Fong was not the only one who was shocked. Even Yi Qianqian was shocked. God is watching from above. On the way here, she had already mentally prepared herself for Fong Tongtong. This is God. What exactly does he look like? Although she was disappointed, we'll find out when we get to the surveillance room later. Her retribution. Lin Miao Miao felt guilty.
She looked come over to take a look and expression and asked, but she never expected this to be the result. I should be the one asking you that. Hymen was torn today. Yi Qianqian looked at Lin Miao Miao. Nothing happened finally turned her head away and Fong Tong. She pulled her suitcase and looked at Dr. Li. Yi Qianqian held her face. Where should I go to wait for my boyfriend? And she didn't know what to feel. Dr. Li was a little embarrassed. She had always believed in Fong Tong, but he still turned around and said, she thought that Shenjilia was lying to her. Yi Qianqian, after all, didn't even look at Lin Miao Miao. She followed Dr. Li into the office. Fong Tong wouldn't do such a thing. Shenjilia's office was very clean and very tidy. All the documents were stacked together. She didn't doubt her at all. But she didn't expect the truth to be like this. Yi Qianqian took a look at them. Disbelief. The handwriting was very beautiful and vigorous. She broke down. She grabbed the doctor's arm and said in disbelief. There was a stack of books on the desk in the office. Could there be a mistake? Next to the books was a photo frame. Sympathetic. Shenjilia was holding a woman in his arms and smiling brightly. I sympathize with your daughter taken when they were in Venice. But this kind of thing is what it is. There were beautiful blue splashes of water. Should be arrested by the police. After the ripples, I will give you a medical certificate that contrasted against the beautiful and clean blue sky. With that, Yi Qianqian the female doctor patted Mrs. Fong on her shoulder and left. She picked up a tissue to be unable to bear dust off it, and her whole body really beautiful collapsed. Yi Qianqian stared at the photo, hard to believe. Then she looked around in boredom as she waited for Shenjilia to return. Fong and shouted. However, Shenjilia seemed to be a little busy. Mrs. Fong's eyes were already red to begin with for about half an hour. Tears before Shenjilia finally returned. She thumped her chest and shouted, "One ear. What kind of sin did I commit? The medical records in his hands." As he walked, he felt as if her heart had been violently shaken. The nurse looked very young. At Mrs. Fong. She was probably in her early 20s. There were some pimples on her face. As she listened, she lowered her head and took notes seriously with a complicated look in her eyes. Shenjilia raised his head. But in the end, after glancing around and sighed heavily, his eyes curved. Fong Tong had already fallen into a deep sleep. That's all. Everything that happened that day was probably a heavy blow to her. If there's anything you don't know how to handle, you can ask Xiaoli and Xiaozhou, which were red and swollen. I won't be coming over tomorrow. Her heart ached. I might have to take a few days off in a few days. Ask Xiaozhou to keep an eye on 1797. The young nurse nodded repeatedly. Mrs. Fong touched her daughter's forehead as tears streamed down her cheeks. As she spoke, didn't know how long she stood there, but she didn't wait for Fong Tong to wake up and nodded with a smile. She left on her own. When she reached the bottom of the hospital, after a slight smile, suddenly felt that the documents that Shenjilia had handed over and left. There was no doubt that the truth was right in front of them and walked to his seat. There was nothing between Shenjilia and Fong Tong. She stared at him as he walked toward her and blinked. She ran her fingers through her hair. All she could think about was what Shenjilia had said with one hand and kissed her gently. I've never done anything to let you down. It's the same in the past, the same now. I'm going to get changed. And the same in the future. All right, go ahead. Shenjilia propped himself up and took off his white coat as he walked and seemed to ring in her ears. About 5 minutes later, it was soft and Shenjilia walked out. She could almost imagine Shenjilia's set of clothes. This kind of despair seemed to flow from Shenjilia to herself. The sky was misty and somewhat dark and gloomy. An overwhelming sadness engulfed him. And he couldn't stop it. Heard that. Yi Qianqian felt a lump in her throat suppressed on the way over in the direction of her car. She asked, Shenjilia, are we going to stay at your place? Grandpa's funeral was held for a few days. I don't think that's a good idea. And everything was handled by the elders. Isn't your family here? Even so, if not, Yi Qianqian was still overwhelmed with work. Shenjilia glanced at her from the side and dealing with the matter. Am I supposed to let my woman stay in a hotel when she's brought his wife and sister-in-law back to Kingstown? When Yi Qianqian heard this, Yi Qianqian off at the entrance of the neighborhood and drove home. Shenjilia held her in his arms and had no intention of going upstairs. The doctors and nurses came, picked up the phone, went to greet her. Opened the dial page. They looked at Yi Qianqian and pressed the familiar string of numbers. The person on the other side of the phone seemed to be busy. They all looked very surprised after 2 consecutive calls. Oh my God, what a beautiful girl! Forget it. Old just as Yi Qianqian was about to hang up, the call was suddenly picked up. Enlightened. Hello, his girlfriend. It was a gentle female voice. The praises were all half true and younger than her. Yi Qianqian froze when she heard the voice. Say anything. The woman on the other end didn't hear a reply, so she asked. Yi Qianqian's lips curled into a smile. Yi Qianqian didn't say anything. Them one by one. She hung up the phone without thinking. Everyone. It was only after the call ended that Yi Qianqian realized that her heart was racing like thunder. Is it the She of Hope? It was like being a thief. The west of east. She took a look and confirmed that it was indeed Shenjilia's number. Called She? If she remembered correctly,
Words with multiple had previously left a note for her on his phone as future wife, felt as if she had turned into a monkey. Heart at the end. Even her face was stiff from all the smiling. That the girl did not finally left the psychology department. Either Shenjilia had changed the contact number. You have too many colleagues. Shenjilia had deleted her phone number. She rubbed her face and followed Shenjilia to the underground parking lot. Why are you so familiar with everyone? But very quickly he laughed at himself. So much that my face is sore. You right. Who said that Shenjilia could only have her? Come on, that she could break up with him. You're still complaining? But he couldn't find someone else. You don't know how happy you are. Yi Qianqian pouted. It was just that his heart felt so uncomfortable. His arm. I went upstairs in a daze. But why are you so familiar with everyone? As soon as he entered, he saw like a small fish tanked inside. That's right. The little fish were still swimming around energetically. Why would so many people praise you for your beauty? And the seaweed was bobbing in the direction of his car. She's so strong. The logo on the key was a Buick. Couldn't help but sigh. It looked very low-key. She looked at the colorful, beautiful, and luggage in the trunk. Little fish. Yi Qianqian opened the door and sat in the front passenger seat. But it seemed like they could live well without her. She asked, "Is this car yours?" "It's my grandmother's." Take it out and open it. Your grandma can drive. Poured some fish food for the little fish. Of course, my grandma immediately jumped up. When she heard that you were coming today, in no time, she prepared a lot of things fish for you. Only had a memory of 7 seconds. Became even more nervous when she heard that. He would completely forget everything he had done. Help but ask. Therefore, in the world of fish, it was normal for them to die from overeating. Tonight's activities have all been arranged for any more food. Shenjilia smiled. She got up and took a shower. Yi Qianqian didn't sleep the whole night and started the car. She tossed and turned in bed. When you see my grandmother, her mind was filled with thoughts about who the person Yi Qianqian didn't dare compliment him. Could it really be Shenjilia's new girlfriend? Yi Qianqian knew very well what kind of person old Mrs. Shen was. When Yi Qianqian was still in the Shen family, what time it was before she had been bullied by this old lady. Due to the recent series of events, how big of a change could there be? She had taken a lot of leave for no reason. With that thought in mind, although the chief editor wasn't afraid about it, and said, she expressed her understanding. Why don't we go there tomorrow? The next day was Tuesday. After we're done, Yi Qianqian returned from Yingtown. She had to go back no matter what. When she arrived at the office, it was a battered day. She worked overtime until late at night. In the future, Yi Qianqian only came out of the office at 9:30 p.m. Yi Qianqian's voice grew softer and softer. She didn't want to go home. She looked at Shenjilia's expression. It was stuck out her tongue. There was no one waiting for her. My sister married into your family, and no one had prepared everything for her return. It's not like you don't know how your grandmother treated my sister. After walking around the Connecticut River for a while, Shenjilia heard that. He slowly walked back to his house. Exasperated and amused. The next morning, he retorted, got up early. How can that be the same? She went for a jog on a whim. My brother and your sister had an ill-fated relationship. When it was almost time to knock off at relationship, she suddenly thought of looking for Shenjilia. How can you compare our situation to that of my brother and your sister? And why she had picked up his call at that time. By the way, the thought if your grandmother finds out that I'm Yi's older sister, tidied up. Will she have a problem with me? Just as she was about to go downstairs. She won't. Shenjilia said as he drove steadily. Her current identity wasn't suitable for such things. She knows who you are, despite the thought. Yi Qianqian still walked out uncontrollably. Did you think I would bring you back just like that? There was a subway station downstairs of Eurasian was a little smug. And he looked at the front of the car and also near the subway station. My parents are both at home to reach Hushin Hospital in 20 minutes. Don't be nervous later. Yi Qianqian walked to the psychology and act like you normally do. As soon as she entered, don't be shy. She ran into Shenjilia's colleague whom she had met once. My father may be a little more serious, he was a little surprised and to get along with. Hey, aren't you your brother? My brother isn't at home. And replied, "It's okay. Hello. Even if he's at home, you don't have to worry about him at all." Awkwardly and he doesn't know you to begin with. You and brother Shen really broke up? Perhaps when he sees you, Yi Qianqian felt a little awkward. That you resemble Yi. She half jokingly said, "Haha. How did you really underestimate the relationship between me and your brother?" I almost got into a fight with him. His head. Have you forgotten? Brother Shen has been transferred to the capital. Remembered after being there for a few days. Yi Qianqian looked up in surprise. When Shen Manting had first gone missing already, the smell of gunpowder saw the look in her eyes and nodded. And in Yi Qianqian had been quite strong. Although the matter had been resolved perfectly, if he didn't recover from such a serious injury, if the two of them were to meet now, when Lao Zhou heard this, he felt a little awkward. He said, Shenjilia smiled. Brother Shen has been in a bad mood for the past few days. This guy looks gentle and weak. His hand hasn't even fully recovered yet. And he's already going back to work in the capital. Shenjilia laughed. He doesn't take good care of himself either. If I can't even beat him, he'll get sick. Wouldn't I be too weak? Oh, thank you for telling me. Then why did you say that he's skilled? TSK. It's more than enough to deal with you. Chapter 1799. Why do you have to deal with me? It doesn't matter. If you want to deal with someone, deal with my man. It's none of your business, said matter-of-factly. Yi Qianqian was well aware of Shenjilia's face between her and Shenjilia. He nodded his head and exclaimed, "It was like a substandard house. You're finally enlightened." It looked like a tall building that was built on top of one another.
But
your
in
mom
reality,
and grandma think
the
my
most
gift is
important
shabby?
part was that
What
the
did you buy?
foundation was built
I bought
very
a set of
crudely.
skincare products for your
slightest
mom.
movement would cause
It's called
the majestic
Sea Blue
building
Mystery
to
or
shake.
something.
Then,
I don't
when
really
they weren't
understand
paying
it,
attention,
but I heard
it
that
would
mom
suddenly
uses it
collapse
very
and
well.
seriously
I
injure
bought a
them.
ginseng for
Yi
your
Qianqian
grandma.
was currently
My dad gave
seriously
me the
injured.
ginseng.
Lao
And
Zhou
it's
saw
said
that
to be
Yi
100
Qianqian
was
was in a bad mood and said, "Sister-in-law, why don't I treat you to a meal as an
I
apology?
also bought a bottle of wine
I'll call
for your
Xiaogu.
dad.
It's
There's
also
no
made by
need.
my dad.
He
Xiaogu
said
is
it's
a
a
fresh meat in
100-year-old
our
wine.
department."
He seems to
Shenjilia
be
was
on good
surprised.
terms with the
He
girl who
looked
took
at her
care
and
of brother
asked,
Shen for a
"Is
few
that all
days.
you've packed in your
It's
suitcase?"
because he's close to the
I
girl
also
that we
have a change of
misunderstood.
clothes.
At the
I
end of
didn't
the
bring
day,
anything else.
he's the one who's at fault.
There's no need. Thank you. I'm going back. Goodbye. Sister-in-law. Chapter
Don't call me
18:16.
sister-in-law. I'm yours.
Yi Qianqian interrupted
Why do you still
Lao
want a
Zhou.
gift?
I can't
Yi
accept
Qianqian
that.
said
We've
matter-of-factly.
already broken up.
No.
With
Fine.
that, Yi
I'll
Qianqian
collect it
turned
myself
around
tonight.
and walked away quickly.
Shenjilia said
Lao
casually.
Zhou looked at Yi
Shenjilia was in a good
slender and
mood.
frail figure
After
from
turning
behind.
the corner,
He couldn't
stopped
say a
the car
single
in
word.
front of a large
Lao
villa.
Zhou watched Yi
When Yi
Qianqian's silhouette
heard that,
disappear into
her
the
face
corridor
immediately
before
turned
he
red.
picked up his phone.
She glared at him
and called
cursed in a low
Shenjilia.
voice.
In the capital.
Pervert. The moment
What's wrong?
Shenjilia returned,
What's in your head?
he was scheduled
You're calling
to
me a
attend a
pervert.
few meetings in the
I really
hospital.
don't know who's the pervert
After the
here.
meetings,
He had a
Shenjilia
4-hour
looked
consultation
disgusted.
session.
He unbuckled his
He was
seatbelt
busy
and
for many
said,
days
"Get
without
out
a
of the
break."
car."
A doctor
Yi
in the
Qianqian
capital
looked
hospital
around.
suddenly got
surrounding
into a car
environment was
accident.
very comfortable.
There was no one to
In
take
front of
care
her
the
was the
patients
facade of a
and a bunch
luxurious
of things
villa.
under his care.
It looked very comfortable.
The hospitals in the
To be
capital
able to
were
have
not
a
like
villa
those
in a
in
place
King's
like the
Town.
capital.
They were short-staffed
Qianqian
and worked at a
secretly
faster
clicked her
pace.
tongue and asked,
There were even
"Is
more
this where you
patients
live?"
coming to the psychology department.
What's wrong?
Therefore, the
Shenjilia
person in
leaned
charge
over
of
to
the
help her
hospital
unbuckle
applied
her
to have
seatbelt.
Shenjilia
As
transferred
he
back.
asked, his eyes
When they
moved
heard
to her
that
chest.
Shenjilia had a
Yi
girlfriend in
Qianqian was wearing a
Kingstown,
V-neck dress.
they thought it would
The
take
mint
some
green
effort.
color made the
They
dress
didn't
look
expect
especially
Shenjilia
fair.
to agree
The
without
collar was
hesitation.
originally not
While
low,
everyone was
but under the
pleasantly
pressure of the
surprised,
seat belt,
they also handed
the fullness
everything
of her
over
breasts
to him
was squeezed
as a
up.
matter of course.
It looked very
It was
alluring.
12:30
Yi
p.m.
Qianqian didn't
in
notice
Beijing.
her collar at all.
Shenjilia had
When
been
she
busy
saw
for most of
Shenjilia's
the day.
days. When
She
he finally
immediately
had a
covered
hot
her
meal,
chest and
he
pushed his
received a
face
call
away.
from Lao Zhou.
She scolded.
When he saw that it
"What
was
are you
Lao
looking
Zhou,
at?" Shenjilia
pervert.
wasn't in a hurry.
Shenjilia
He
snorted
slowly
and
finished the
reached
food
out.
in his mouth
Yi Qianqian
before he
shrank
picked up the
back
phone and
Shenjilia
placed it on
immediately
speaker.
said,
He
"Don't
picked up
move.
his spoon again
I'll
and
help you
asked,
tidy up."
"Hello." When
What
she
about
heard
dinner?
that,
Yeah,
Yi
I just
Qianqian
rested.
immediately stopped
What's wrong?
moving.
Nothing.
Shenjilia reached
I
his
just
hand
wanted
out,
to tell you that
and
your
slid
woman
it
came
directly
looking
into
for
her
you
collar.
just now.
He gave it a
Shenjilia
gentle rub.
stopped eating,
Yi
and his
Qianqian
chewing
exclaimed.
slowed down.
Her cheeks
She doesn't
immediately
seem to
turned
know
red.
that you've been
She
transferred
shouted,
back to the
"What are you
capital."
doing?" "I'm helping you tidy up," Shenjilia said confidently. He suddenly opened his palm and took out a necklace. He gently placed it in front of Yi Qianqian. It was in the shape of a cherry blossom. The craftsmanship was very exquisite. Yi Qianqian was dazzled by the diamonds on it. When she saw it clearly, she blinked. Shenjilia was still in a very good mood. He said, "It doesn't look good to have a bare neck. I'll help you put it on." Yi Qianqian reached out and touched it. It was warm. She could tell that Shenjilia had been holding it in his palm for a long time. She giggled and said, "Can't you just give it to me? Am I not direct enough?" Shenjilia's cheeks were a little red, but he maintained a serious expression and said, "Here, I'll put it on for you." Yi Qianqian leaned over, and Shenjilia unbuttoned it and put it on. Yi Qianqian's skin was fairer. When she put on the rose gold necklace, Shenjilia felt that the woman in front of him was even more beautiful. Feeling pleased with himself, Shenjilia opened the car door and said, "Let's go." Yi Qianqian became even more nervous. When she saw Shenjilia get out of the car, she opened the door as well. Just as Shenjilia retrieved his luggage and was about to bring her in, Yi Qianqian sensed that someone was watching her. He looked around but couldn't find anyone. Old Mrs. Shen stood on the second floor. The curtains next to the floor-to-ceiling windows were lightly drawn, perfectly concealing the old lady's aged but spirited body. Chapter 18:17. When Nanny heard the old lady's excited voice, she quickly put down her work and walked over to where the old lady was standing. He looked down and saw that the familiar car had indeed returned. Beside the car, Shenjilia held a suitcase in his hand. Beside him was a slender girl in a long dress. She looked like she had a good temperament. When Nanny saw that, she was elated and said, "Let's go down quickly. Haven't you been waiting for this for a long time? Let's go." Hey, I'm coming. You go down first. I have to take a look at the girl's face first. If she's not pretty, then forget it. The old lady held the binoculars and looked very excited. After staring for a long time, she finally saw the girl turn around. When she saw Yi Qianqian's face, the old lady finally slapped her thigh and exclaimed, "She's so pretty. I'll go down." Nanny He hadn't seen Yi Qianqian's face, but when she saw the old lady's excitement, she quickly picked up the binoculars to take a look. With one look, she saw that the girl was wearing a mint green dress. She looked quite tall and fair, but her head happened to be turned around, so she couldn't see her face. Feeling helpless and regretful, Nanny He had no choice but to go down. Yi Qianqian and Shenjilia lingered at the door for a while. After taking out the things that had been prepared for the elders from the suitcase, they walked inside. When they walked in, old Mrs. Shun happened to come down happily. Her eyes looked over. When she saw Yi Qianqian, she smiled kindly and said, "Oh, this must be Qianqian. You're so pretty." Yi Qianqian knew the old lady. Not only did she know her through Yi Yuyu, but she had also met her once or twice when she was in Kingstown. At that time, the old lady had been with Yu Lily the entire time. She was so focused on running away with Yu Lily that it was possible that she didn't remember Yi Qianqian at all. Yi Qianqian wasn't a person who liked to get close to people. She laughed and nodded her head. "Yes, Grandma. I've heard about you for a long time. Julia, that brat, has been hiding you like a secret. He's afraid that I'll eat you up." As the old lady spoke, she glared at Shenjilia with a pair of reproachful eyes. Then, she stepped forward and took Yi Qianqian's hand affectionately. She said, "I heard that you and Yi Yuyu are sisters. You look so much alike. But you have good luck. You are good-looking and have a plump face. Oh, this is a blessed face." Old Mrs. Shun was elated. Come. Take a seat. Julia, pour some tea." Yi Qianqian was a little embarrassed by the compliment. She subconsciously glanced at Shenjilia. Shenjilia, on the other hand, was smiling. He seemed to be in a good mood. When he turned around, Nanny He had already served the tea. He studied Yi Qianqian's face and remarked, "They really look alike. They're practically carved from the same mold as Yuyu. They're like twins." "Ahem. We are twins, yes, but we are fraternal. She looks more like my father." "Do you look more like your mother?" This was the first time Shenjilia had heard of it. Yi Qianqian shook her head. "I also look like my father." Chapter 1818. Old Mrs. Shin knew that the Yi family's parents had divorced a long time ago. Furthermore, they did not have a good relationship with Yi Tian. That was why she had spoken up. After saying this, she moved closer to him mysteriously and whispered, "Let me tell you, most people don't like women with this kind of appearance. They like women with round faces like yours. You look so beautiful and blessed." Yi Qianqian smiled and blushed. "Grandma, this is a tonic that Qianqian specially brought for you. It's obvious that it's very old. Take a look." Shenjilia took out the ginseng that he had specially prepared for the old lady. "Look at how thoughtful my wife is." Old Mrs. Shun was delighted. She patted Yi Qianqian's hand and said, "It's great that you're here. You even brought a gift. You're too kind." However, he couldn't help but take a few glances at it. He brought it over and sniffed it. His eyes lit up. "This is good. This thing is hard to buy. Even if you have the money, you might not be able to buy it. My father made it himself. It's been there for a long time, but I heard that it's been preserved very well. So I brought it to you. I knew it. Treasures of this level are all collector's items. So it really is a collector's item. Of course, I have brought you the best." Shenjilia closed the lid with a smug look on his face. Qianqian put in a lot of effort on this trip. She brought tonics and tonic wine. She even brought good things for Mom and Dad. Old Mrs. Shun was even happier. She nodded and said, "You're so sensible. By the way, Qianqian, I heard that you're painting?" "No, Grandma. I was just staring at other people drawing, for example." In the beginning, Yi Qianqian was still a little nervous, but as she spoke, her words became smoother and smoother. In the end, he and the old lady laughed together, and after a while, they became one. Shenjilia had been worried that she might not be used to it, but it was obvious that he had been overthinking things. Old Mrs. Shun was an old fox. After chatting with Yi Qianqian for a long time, she pulled her into her room and said that she wanted to talk about something private. How could Shenjilia not let her go? He could only watch helplessly as his woman was dragged away. There were guests at home today. Shen Longyue and Mrs. Shun came home very early. As soon as he entered, Nanny he had already started preparing dinner. Madame Shen asked impatiently, "Where is he?" "He's inside. Grandma took him away. He's in the room." Madame Shen grinned from ear to ear and said, Okay. I'll go in and take a look. Mom will help you check." "You don't need to check. I've already proposed to her anyway. When I'm ready, we'll go get the certificate." When Mrs. Shun heard this, her heart calmed down. She smiled warmly and quickly walked in. On the other hand, Shen Longyue stepped forward and hooked his arm around his son's shoulder. He laughed heartily and said, "Good boy, quietly doing something big. Of course, I have to treat my wife seriously. Once it's confirmed, it's confirmed. You're not changing it." "Bah, what the heck? Where can I find such a good girl next time?" Shen Longyue laughed heartily, his face full of ridicule. "Then I want to see what kind of girl can make our second young master Shen so infatuated." Shenjilia smiled smugly. "You'll like it too." In old Mrs. Ye's room, old Mrs. Ye was reading Yi Qianqian's palm. She frowned and asked, "Qianqian darling, has your hand been injured before? This palm reading doesn't seem right." Chapter 18-19. Suddenly, Yi Qianqian's heart skipped a beat. She looked at her palm. It didn't look any different from usual. What's wrong? Yi Qianqian's heart was a little uneasy. Looking at the old lady, she felt a little strange. She had heard of the old lady's mysterious ways. She had heard that she was a big believer in all kinds of nonsense. If she found out that something was wrong, she would never let it go. Yi Yuyu was a living example. If it weren't for the old lady, Yi Yuyu and Shen Luoan might still be married. Although Yi Yuyu was happier with Li Jinnan than with Shen Luoan, Shen Luo and was Yi Yuyu's first love. They had grown up together, and they had been in love for a long time. It was only right and proper for them to be together. Guan Kui had stayed in the hospital and hadn't interfered with them. Without the old lady's opposition, Shen Luo and might have slowly discovered the good in Yi Yuyu, and their relationship would have slowly improved. Then Yi Yuyu and Shen Luo and could be together forever. However, the ideal was perfect, but in reality, the old lady was right in between them. When she heard the old lady's words, Yi Qianqian had a bad feeling. "Your hand?" Old Mrs. Shun's frown deepened. "It looks pretty good. It looks rich and powerful. When were you born?" Well, Yi Qianqian thought about it and decided to tell her birthday. "What time is it?" "It should be around midnight. Your 8 characters are a bit sinister, but your appearance is still not quite the same as Yuyu's. Your face is more rich and noble. Overall, you look quite blessed. But why is your hand broken in the middle? It looks a little unlucky." Yi Qianqian's heart beat faster. She asked, "Grandma, what do you mean?" To put it bluntly, it's a sign of a short life. When Yi Qianqian heard that, her hand shrank back in fear. A short life? Yi Qianqian was a little scared. Does that mean I don't have long to live? I don't know much about palmistry, but from what I can see, the one with the best fate is Eulili. You know Eulili, don't you? When old Mrs. Shen mentioned Eulili, she smiled happily. Lily, this child, was not very lucky before she turned 25. But after she turned 25, everything went smoothly for her. Yi Qianqian had heard Eulili mention it before. For a moment, she felt a little awkward and said, "I seem to have heard Lily mention it before. It's said that she's going to give birth to a son and a daughter. Lily recently went for a prenatal checkup, and it seems to be a child." Yes, Lily will give birth to a son and a daughter. I'm telling you, I'm a half-fairy. What I say can't be wrong. As old Mrs. Shen spoke, her eyes looked up and down Yi Qianqian's palm. She looked left and right before finally putting Yi Qianqian's hand down. Qianqian, can you tell Grandma if your hand was injured or was it born like this? Well, I was probably born like this. Yi Qianqian glanced at her palm. There was a faint red line on it. If one didn't look closely, they wouldn't be able to tell that this red line was different from other palm prints. Yi Qianqian stared at it for a long time before saying, I'm guessing that this is a birthmark. Dash. Chapter 1820. Ever since Yi Qianqian could remember, this red line had been following her. Yi Qianqian had never doubted the origin of this red line. It was as if she had eyes and a nose since she was young. Yi Qianqian felt that it was a very normal thing. But how did this little red line become the sign of a short life in the old lady's mouth? Old Mrs. Shen nodded her head. There was an indescribable expression on her face. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door. Yi Qianqian and the old lady looked over at the same time. A lady who looked to be in her 40s or 50s walked in. It was obvious that she had taken good care of herself. Her exquisite makeup made her look very comfortable. Her eyes bore some resemblance to Shen Julia's. She was probably Shen Julia's mother. Mrs. Shen walked in and closed the door behind her. She stared at Yi Qianqian and approached her with a smile. This must be Qianqian. Hello, I'm Julia's mother. Yi Qianqian had guessed it. When she heard that, she quickly stood up and greeted. Hello, Auntie. Sit down. Don't stand on ceremony with me. Mrs. Shen pressed Yi Qianqian back onto the sofa and said warmly, I've heard Julia talk about you for a long time. I heard that you're an especially adorable and straightforward girl. You're pretty and have a good personality. It's great that our Julia met you. Yi Qianqian's mood was already a little sour after old Mrs. Shen said that she would have a short life. When she heard Mrs. Shen's compliment, it was difficult for her to be happy. She laughed and said, He's just spouting nonsense. I'm not that good. How can you spout nonsense? I believe in my son. If he says you're not bad, then you're definitely not bad. Old Mrs. Shen looked at them and stood up. Keep Qianqian company. I'm going out for a while. Mom, it's time for dinner. Where are you going? I'm going to old Lee's house. You guys go ahead and eat. Don't wait for me. Old Mrs. Shen waved her hand and walked out. Yi Qianqian didn't know why, but she felt a little strange. Old Mrs. Shen seemed to be treating her coldly. Was it an illusion? Yi Qianqian subconsciously looked at the red line on her palm. She clenched her fist and let it fall. Granny Shen was gone for quite a long time. Mrs. Shen led Yi Qianqian to the study. The two of them chatted for a long time. Shen Julia could clearly hear their laughter coming from the study. Shen Longyue was sitting in the living room, talking to Shen Julia. When he heard the crisp laughter, he couldn't help but laugh. Your girlfriend is amazing. It's rare for your mother to be this happy. Shen Julia was very pleased with himself. Of course. Don't you know whose son chose her as his wife? Shen Longyue's smile widened. He pointed at Shen Julia and said, You only know how to suck up. Isn't that the truth? Like father, like son. You can find such a good wife like my mother. How can I lose? Got it. Hurry up and call your mother and future wife to eat. Shen Julia turned his head and saw that Nanny he had already prepared the meal. He immediately stood up and said, Yes, sir. When Shen Julia walked in, he realized that the two women were reading a book. When Shen Julia got closer, he could clearly see the nude photo of himself. Chapter 1821. When Shen Julia saw it, he immediately felt uncomfortable. He rushed forward to cover the photo and shouted, D***, Mom. What are you doing? Mrs. Shen laughed out loud and said, What are you doing? Photos are meant for people to see. What are you being shy about? Yi Qianqian laughed out loud and said, I didn't know you were so cute when you were a child. Oh my, I'm so shy. Shen Julia's face turned bright red. He immediately snatched the photo album away with a dark expression and said, When was this taken? Why didn't I know about it? When you were 13, you sneaked out to the reservoir to swim and didn't come back for the whole morning. Everyone was scared out of their wits. Later, your father got angry and stripped you naked and threw you out at the door. Mrs. Shun laughed so hard that tears almost came out of her eyes. At that time, you were still outside and refused to admit your mistake. At that time, there was no one walking around the door. Your brother went to take a picture of you as a souvenir. How could you forget such a deep impression? I forgot. Shenjulia's face was redder than it had ever been. He hid the photo album and said, "Let's go eat." "Why are you looking at photos?" Yi Qianqian laughed even more wildly and said, "Your face is so red. It looks like it's real." "Shut up." Shenjulia went forward and pulled her up. "Let's eat." Before Yi Qianqian could catch her breath, she was pulled out by Shenjulia. Mrs. Shun looked at them from behind with a gratified expression. Yi Qianqian was pulled out, but she still recklessly pulled the photo album and said, "I haven't finished looking at it." "You're not allowed to look at it. How dare you look at my nude photos with my mother? Shameless. Go away. I didn't see anything." When Shenjulia heard that, he reached out and pulled her into his arms. He whispered in her ear, "It's okay. I'll show you everything later." When Yi Qianqian heard that, her face immediately turned red. She glared at him and said, "Shameless. How am I shameless? Don't look at it if you have the guts." As he spoke, he leaned over, not caring that he was in his own home. Yi Qianqian pinched his waist and gritted her teeth. "Your mother is still behind us." It didn't hurt, but Shenjulia wanted to wail and say, "Oh my, I'm trying to murder my husband." Her voice wasn't soft, and Yi Qianqian was startled. She turned to look at Mrs. Shun. Mrs. Shun could not help but laugh, as she looked at them ambiguously with a smile. Yi Qianqian's face grew hotter, and she pushed him away. "Get lost." Shenjulia quickly leaned forward again. "Why are you scramming? This is my house. Come on. I'll take you to wash your hands and have dinner." The two of them pulled each other into the kitchen. Yi Qianqian felt extremely awkward and whispered, "Can you restrain yourself a little? Your parents are here." "Restrain what?" Shenjulia pressed his head against her shoulder and said in a low voice, "I'm already very restrained. I almost kissed you when I was hugging you just now." Yi Qianqian felt even more humiliated. She turned her head and said, "You." Before she could say anything, Shenjulia suddenly leaned in and planted a kiss on her lips. His voice was very loud, and Yi Qianqian was stunned. She immediately reacted and reached out to pat him. Shenjulia took a step back and held her hand with a smile. He said, all right. Let's wash our hands." Shen Longyue and his wife, as well as Nanny He, were all watching from behind. Chapter 1822. I heard she's Yu's older sister? Shen Longyue looked at his wife and said, "They do look alike, but Qianqian's face is a little rounder." "Yes, Mom seems to like her very much. She had a good chat with her in the room just now." When Shen Longyue heard that, he smiled and nodded his head. He looked at Yi Qianqian and Shenjulia, who were washing their hands in the kitchen. "Mom rarely likes a young girl so much. It's not easy." Mrs. Shun looked at her husband with a smile and said softly, "Let's go wash our hands and eat." Shen Longyue smiled, stood up, and reached out to his wife. Mrs. Shun blushed slightly, but she still reached out and put her hand on her husband's palm. Yi Qianqian and Shenjulia quickly finished washing their hands and sat down. The more Nanny He looked at the girl, the more she liked her. She said, "Qianqian, these are all dishes from Auntie He's hometown. They're all Auntie's specialties. Try them." Yi Qianqian smiled. "Yes. Thank you, Auntie He. Nanny He, why don't you sit down and eat with us?" Shenjulia patted the stool next to him. Mother He looked flattered. She waved her hands and said, No. Forget it. Old Madam won't be happy if she sees it." Shenjulia understood, and didn't want to force her. When Yi Qianqian saw this, her understanding of the old lady became even more horrified. This old lady looked a little scary. When Yi Qianqian recalled what the old lady had said about her short life, she felt a little uncomfortable. Nanny He brought Yi Qianqian a bowl of rice. Feeling a little embarrassed, Yi Qianqian asked, "Grandma isn't back yet. Aren't you going to wait for her?" "No need, let's eat first." Mrs. Shun waved her hand. "Your grandmother is always like this. She often goes out and doesn't see anyone. Sometimes, She will eat at a friend's house. We don't have to worry about her. Yi Qianqian nodded, but in his heart, he couldn't help but think. What if the old lady came back when they were halfway through eating? Would she say that he didn't know the rules and didn't show filial respect to his elders? The more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed. When she saw that everyone in the family was used to it, she slowly began to eat. Because of Shen Jilia's presence, Yi Qianqian didn't feel too restrained when she ate. All of a sudden, Yi Qianqian felt a warm sensation on her leg, and she shivered involuntarily. Her heart raced as she turned to look at Shen Jilia. Shen Jilia's expression was natural as he calmly ate his meal. Yi Qianqian pushed his hand away. At the same time, she felt someone looking at her. She looked up and saw that it was Madame Shen. Her face heated up, and she immediately lowered her head. The next moment she felt another itch between her legs. She immediately clamped down, and her whole body went numb. She turned around and glared at Shen Jilia. Who would have thought that Shen Jilia's expression would be so calm and composed? Feeling her gaze, he turned around and smiled brightly. Yi Qianqian was at a loss for words. She glared at him fiercely. Mrs. Shen noticed and asked, "What's wrong?" Shen Jilia smiled and said, "She loves me too much." Yi Qianqian glared at him, and quickly lowered her head with a red face. She reached out and pinched Shen Jilia's thigh hard. Shen Jilia wailed. Mrs. Shen asked again, "What's wrong?" Shen Jilia smiled brightly. "Mom, it's nothing. Let's eat." Chapter 1823. But she didn't expose him. She lowered her head and continued eating. Yi Qianqian felt that she was about to become a slut. In public she actually bah. It was all Shen Jilia's fault. Fortunately, Shen Jilia's parents seemed to be easy to deal with. She was afraid that if Shen Jilia's grandmother came back and saw it, would she lowered her head and blushed as she quietly finished her meal. Other than the few times when Shen Jilia would reach out and touch her, everything else seemed quite harmonious. Fortunately, old Mrs. Shen still didn't come back after they finished eating. After Yi Qianqian finished eating, she was about to help Nanny he clear the dishes when Shen Jilia pulled her away. Shen Jilia's parents were looking at them ambiguously, which made Yi Qianqian feel even more guilty. Could it be that the old couple had seen all those small movements just now? Yi Qianqian's cheeks were burning as she was pulled away. She wanted to find a hole to hide in. Once they were out the door, Yi Qianqian retracted her hand and asked, "What were you doing just now?" "Huh? What do you mean what?" Shen Jilia played dumb. He blinked his eyes and looked at Yi Qianqian with an aggrieved expression. Yi Qianqian's face was still warm. She hit his hand hard again and said, "Your mother and father are still here, and you're touching me all over. I keep feeling like your mother is watching me." "I wasn't touching you all over. Don't accuse me wrongly," Shen Jilia exclaimed with his arms crossed. "Besides, isn't that how you usually eat? I'm used to it." Shen Jilia's words made Yi Qianqian feel even more ashamed. She roared, "Pfft! You're shameless. You're not usually like that." "I am. You're just used to it and can't feel it. I'm not. Don't tell me you're always touching a girl's leg and suddenly forgot who you're doing it with." Yi Qianqian narrowed her eyes and looked at him suspiciously. "Pfft! Pfft! How could that be? I only have you. You can't suspect me." Shen Jilia held Yi Qianqian in his arms and quickly began to express his loyalty. Yi Qianqian looked at him and snorted, but she couldn't help but smile. Shen Jilia saw the smile on her face and his lips curled up. He leaned forward and kissed her. Yi Qianqian was shocked and instinctively looked to her left and right. After confirming that there was no one around, she pinched his waist again and said, "You're so annoying. We're on the main road. What if someone sees us?" "What's wrong with being seen? I'm kissing my own girlfriend, can't I?" He held Yi Qianqian's hand and pulled her into his arms. "No one usually comes here. Give me a kiss." Yi Qianqian's eyes lit up. "No." Yi Qianqian turned to leave. How could Shen Jilia allow that? He pulled her over and held her in his arms. Then he kissed her passionately. Shen Jilia skillfully penetrated her and squeezed her tighter and tighter. Yi Qianqian struggled for a moment, but it was futile. She looked to her left and right to make sure no one was coming before she closed her eyes. As she passively endured such a passionate kiss, Yi Qianqian felt an unprecedented sense of excitement. This was the first time he had acted so presumptuously on the main road. If someone saw this, it would definitely be very awkward. Ayaya, isn't this our neighbor little Shenshen? A teasing voice sounded like that of a woman. Yi Qianqian was shocked and instinctively pushed Shen Jilia away. Chapter 1824. When he turned his head, he saw a woman in her 30s. She had a head of yellow curly hair, and looked more mature. She looked at Shen Jilia mockingly and said, "Oh my, it's really you. Can't you control yourself in public?" When Shen Jilia saw that it was her, he rolled his eyes and said, "Hey, can you not interrupt me? Do you know how difficult it is to trick my wife into giving me a kiss?" The woman also had a look of disdain on her face. "Wife, are you married? Why didn't I know about it?" "Soon. I'll call you when I get married." Yi Qianqian tried her best to cover her face with her hair. Her face was so red that it looked like she had applied layers of blush. She was so embarrassed that she couldn't lift her head. It was one thing to be seen, but judging from Shen Jilia's tone, they seemed to be very close. The woman looked at Yi Qianqian and said, "Oh, it's a beauty. Aren't you going to introduce her to me?" Shen Jilia put his arm around Yi Qianqian and said, "This is my girlfriend Yi Qianqian." When Yi Qianqian heard that, she had no choice but to look up and extend her hand to the woman. "Hello. Hello. I'm Zhuang Kaidai. I live next door." Zhuang Kaidai looked at Yi Qianqian and suddenly looked surprised. She said, "Why does your girlfriend look a little familiar? Have I seen her somewhere before?" "Of course. Do you remember Yi? Oh, your ex-sister-in-law? Of course I remember." After saying that, Zhuang Kaidai looked as if she had suddenly realized something. She said, "I was wondering where I had seen her before. Are you Yi Yu's sister or sister? You look so similar. Even your names are similar." "Yes. We are twins, not identical. We are heterozygotes. That's why we don't look alike." "I see." Zhuang Kaidai smiled. "But you have good taste. Little Shen has been obedient since he was young. He has never brought a girl home. You're the first one I've seen." When Shen Jilia heard that, he looked at Yi Qianqian with an aggrieved expression and said, See, even Sister Kaidai said so. I'm really a good boy. You can't doubt me in the future. I feel so wronged." Yi Qianqian glared at him. Faced with Zhuang Kaidai's suggestive gaze, she blushed and said, "I was just joking. I never suspected you." He held Yi Qianqian's arm and said, "That's right. I won't do anything to let you down. Isn't that right, Sister Kaidai? I'm very loyal to you." "That's right." Zhuang Kaidai rolled her eyes at him and said, "Forget it. All right, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. My child is still at home alone. Go home and feed the child." "All right, goodbye, Sister Kaidai." Shen Jilia couldn't have asked for more. He quickly waved his hand and urged them on. Zhuang Kaidai was both annoyed and amused at the same time. She said, "You little brat, well done." She strode forward. "I'm leaving. Goodbye, Qianqian." "Goodbye, Sister Kaidai." Zhuang Kaidai walked over and brushed past Yi Qianqian. In a low voice she said, "If you're going to marry this guy, be careful when dealing with his grandmother. She's a tough nut to crack." With that, she pulled away from Yi Qianqian and waved at them. Yi Qianqian's heart skipped a beat. She immediately nodded. "I'm leaving." Zhuang Kaidai finally left. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.